We are now recording.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Tupper, District 3 Commissioner and President of the Board. Regular meeting of the Jefferson County PUD Board of Commissioners. It's Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. It's 5 p.m. Per the Governor's Extended Proclamation 2028, and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jefferson County PUD is no longer providing an in-person room for meetings of the BOC. All meetings will be held remotely via Zoom until otherwise informed by the Governor. Participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand to request to speak. And with that, we'll move on to item 2, agenda review. Commissioners, could you please introduce yourselves to confirm a quorum?
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner, District 1.
Thank you. Everyone is here. So we'll start with the agenda. I'm going to actually ask if we could put a couple breaks in tonight. One definitely between commissioner reports and the executive session between 8 and 9. We'll have a item number 8 and item number 9. We'll put in a 5-minute break there. And then I'm also considering, depending on how long the conversations go, maybe under old business after the timber sale contract discussion, maybe putting another 5-minute break in there, but we'll play that one by ear. We'll see how long everything takes and where we're at. Any objections to that?
I don't have any objections, but I'm assuming the time estimates are you're not referring, when you referred to 8 and 9, those are items 8 and 9 and not.
Yeah, those are the.
Hopefully.
Because I was hoping that those are actually estimates.
Well, 8 o'clock may not be out of the realm, Jeff. I don't know. I'm not sure what all is going to come out in as we go through the agenda. So is there any other additions or corrections to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion.
No.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I'm not sure. Commissioner Collins, do you want to talk a little bit about a letter to the paper this meeting?
Yes.
So could we add that in, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
So where do you want to go with that, Ken? Where exactly do you want to discuss that? Under new business?
Yes, it can be new business.
Let's make it item 7.2. Okay. All right. Anything else that we want to add or detract from this agenda?
I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda as modified.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So let's move on to item number 3, public comment. The public comment period is for any item not specifically listed on the current agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. The chair may place time limits on public comment to allow the meeting to be conducted in an efficient and orderly manner. We'll do one time for 3 minutes per person, and it would help for the audio record if you could state your name and your service location, but it is not mandatory. With that, I will open public comment.
Let's see if I could raise my hand there.
So I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Will, anything *9?
Jessica's got her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I was just wondering, and I don't know, maybe this will come out in a manager's report or something from Don McDaniel, but I was wondering what the percentage or the receptiveness is of the employees to become vaccinated against COVID. I know we've taken all sorts of precautions with working from home and some adjustments to the new building. And so I was just kind of wondering what the receptiveness is and if there's any kind of policy on that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. So Kevin or Joel, I imagine that's something that you guys would be able to speak to.
Just as Commissioner Tupper, I'd just like to say just a small reminder, we're not going to talk about particular individuals.
Thank you, Joel. And as to my knowledge, we do not have a policy yet. The manager has not brought anything forward that I'm aware of unless I missed a meeting somewhere. And the board hasn't taken it up yet, so.
Yeah, we're not requiring or asking any of this questions. There's some HIPAA regulations, so we're not recommending, not mandating, not doing anything like that. And go ahead,
Kevin?
Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just, this is just a point of information that some of the difficulty in the establishing policy on this right now is because the vaccines have been approved under an emergency use authorization by the FDA. And so the policy from, the EOC on down just makes it more complicated because of that. Whereas, vaccines that have gone through the full authorization have a different regulatory view. So that's why there's some confusion out there for it, Jessica.
And I know we do have people who are going to work remotely. Again, this is Kevin's department, and I'm not going to go too far into the weeds with it. But we also, depending on what the governor does, I'm sure that we're going to continue with masking and distancing and probably doing temperatures if we enter the building. I'm sure those are things that we will probably look at and just follow through like everyone else is doing, Jess. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands. I still don't see anything in the chat. I don't see anybody waving. I don't know if Will has everybody blanked out, if they have themselves blanked out. But all right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. If someone comes in later, was unable to get in through the phone, we'll allow them to speak later on. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda by a commissioner and will be considered separately. So we have a consent agenda. Is there any additions or corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we will move on to item number 5, manager and staff reports. This is for information only, not requiring any votes. Go ahead, Kevin.
So we're going to start with Sam, and she's going to talk about wastewater, and she really has some way cool slides that show some of the different things in the wastewater department. So way cool presentation. So Sam, jump in anytime you're ready.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I don't know, Will, should I pull up the presentation or would you like to?
No, go ahead, Sam.
Okay. The one time I was afraid you're going to say that. Okay.
I can do it if you need me to.
No, it's fine. I should have asked if I didn't want the answer, right? Hold on one second. And just for everybody's information, the agenda report follows the presentation pretty close. So we can go through that too, but I thought I'd start with the presentation first. And let me share my screen. Okay, so we're going to start off here, and please ask questions as we go. And hopefully everybody can.
Sam?
Oh, yes, yes.
I'm not seeing your screen.
Oh, okay. Share. Okay, I forgot to share. Okay, so we're going to start again for the third time. Hello, I'm Samantha Harper with the wastewater department, and it's 5 o'clock, it must be. So we're going to just kind of go over some questions came up during the rate hearing regarding wastewater and how we deal with that at the PUD. So hopefully this will answer some of the questions or at least get a discussion started. We're not going to really tackle the money piece right now, but we will do our best to, if there are questions that come up about that, about the monthly rate part. So. Okay, so a little bit of an outline. We are going to review, we met July of 2020 to kind of go over the PUD's on-site septic systems, what we own, what is regulated by Jefferson County Public Health versus what is regulated by the state. So we're going to do a little bit of that review. We're going to do very few septic definitions and then what the PUD is responsible for. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our reserve accounts. So first of all, this is the review part. So the PUD, we manage 16 systems and it goes from DOH stands for Department of Health. Large on-site septic systems is a loss. And we own 5 of those that are regulated by the Department of Health. We own 8 that are community, that are owned or regulated by Jefferson County Public Health. And those are community on-site septic systems. And then we operate and maintain 2 systems and we provide service for 1 system, which is basically a line underneath a highway that we maintain for the, I believe it's a 4-party septic system. And then this just gives you a map of what of those 16 systems with the yellow for Legend. The yellow are the ones that are regulated by Jefferson County. The ones in blue are regulated by Department of Health. The O&M agreements for us, the Meadows and Herbeck Marina down in Quilcene. And then the service agreement is just the blank one, the Colsons. And that's just, as I said, a pipe underneath one of the Jefferson County's rights of way. And so I think we added 2 new customers since this time, but so I believe we're probably up to 359 customers for our wastewater customers. And so now we're going to get into a couple definitions that we're going to talk about when we talk about what the PUD's responsibility is. So effluent for our purposes here is the outflow of the water coming out of the tank. So you'll see that in the image here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. The outflow here is what we refer to as the effluent. The septic tank is usually on the customer's property. So when our customers connect to our large on-site septic system, they get what the county refers to as a tank only permit. So they have to provide a tank and then their effluent goes to the community drain field and through our piping that we own as well. So this is what the tank looks like. And then sometimes, as I have down here in Beckett Point and a couple of the septic tanks in our Calla Point system, they're also grinder pumps as well. So that we can do grinder pumps or flow by gravity. And so we have I sorted them in 2 categories. We have 2 different types of PUD responsibility. For Calla Point and Beckett Point, our responsibility, there's this graphic here. We're responsible from where the septic, from where the sewer exits the building. So what I would call a building envelope to the community drain field. This is a very simplistic graphic. So we come from the house here all through the septic, their individual septic tank on private property, plus we maintain all the joint piping as well as the drain field. And so it was also raised, so what does that monthly fee include? So we replace lids and risers, we pump out tanks as needed, we fill out reports with Jefferson County if that is the regulatory body for the septic, on-site septic system. We maintain the roads, the drain fields and pump facilities. We do annual inspections, monthly monitoring systems, biannual mowing of the drain fields. We replace or repair grinder pumps as needed. And we also make sure that we meet all the permitting regulations for state or local requirements. And we do it so well, we do it twice apparently. So sorry about that last bullet point. So that's kind of our Calla Point and our Beckett Point systems. And so all other PUD systems, so Our other ones on the map that are aside from Calla Point and Beckett Point, the difference is we go from the effluent of the septic tank, so this on-site septic tank, to the drain fields. So as you can see, we come from here and then we go into a joint or community pipe that goes into a drain field. And so those monthly fees include, we maintain the roads to the drain fields and the pump facilities, annual inspections, monthly monitoring system, biannual mowing, and also we make sure that we meet all of the state and local permitting regulations and requirements. So I could pause there if there's any questions just about the difference between the systems.
So Samantha, this is Commissioner Tupper. So obviously your information's in the packet. I guess my question is, do we have this available on the website? Is this information in this presentation also available on the website?
I believe the presentation's in the packet, but we do, I will tell you, even though this is being recorded, we do need to bolster up what we do provide for our wastewater customers on our website. We need to do a better job at that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so the next question that came up during that meeting was about septic reserve accounts. So we do have a couple of our systems do have septic reserve accounts. And so those reserve accounts are set up for catastrophic failure of the community septic system itself. So if you remember that drawing, it's more where the joint pipes come together. And more specifically, it's the drain field. If the drain field no longer works or get clogged, that we have the money in these septic reserve accounts to make sure that we could rebuild and or we most likely would have to rebuild and move to a different location. So, and those funds are held by county, the county's treasurer office. And if a failure happens, the PUD will not be reimbursed for the money until it is approved by Jefferson County Public Health. So we have to provide our backup. And usually when these things happen, we are talking to public health as they are happening, so they're aware, and it's not just sending them an invoice to approve. But they do have to be approved and released by Jefferson County Public Health Department before the treasurer will release the money to the PUD. And the important part on this is not every community on-site system has a reserve account. It was mentioned Calla Point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so are the reserve accounts specific to individual systems?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's community
go
money,
ahead.
not our money,
Correct.
not PUD money, our money.
Yes. So far since I've been here, I've set up one with Jefferson County, and we have one for Calla Point, and there's an amount for each system that we maintain and own for Calla Point. And the one that we set up for, it was a small system in Gardner. I believe there's 4 homes on this community drain field. It was set up by, I'm using the term loosely, it was set up by the developer. So the system was installed back in the 90s. We had them review it to make sure what it would cost if we did have catastrophic failure, what it would cost. And we asked them to put 20% into an account, and then obviously they could sell their pieces and walk away. So that reserve account, we assume that not everything's going to catastrophically fail at one time. Well, you have to play the odds a little bit, but so we had them hold 20% between, that's what was agreed upon between the PUD and the county and the developer. So, so there's 2 of them that I know of. And then we also have one for a system that we maintain, and that was more of the county's requirement. And that would be the Meadows in the Port Hadlock area. So, and then if there's any kind of general questions, I'm still working on trying to, as mentioned before, we have been tracking work order through a work order system. This is mostly for making sure we're tracking the money to break down, how much do we spend on Beckett Point, Calla Point, and then we kind of lump all the other systems together. So I'm trying to make sense of those numbers to make sure that we're giving you an accurate representation of what that monthly fee includes. And so I'm still working on that part. So if there's any questions on what was presented, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Yes,
I-
Sam, go ahead.
I just was gonna state too that this presentation, we will make arrangements with the CalaPoint group and go in and give a little bit more detail specific to their system. But this presentation will be given to the CalaPoint septic people. So
S- Thanks for that, Kevin. I have a question. This is Jeff Randall. And Sam, do you remember when we had, I can't remember what meeting it was, but we had a presentation on this. We talked about the proposed rates and the capital surcharge. And one of the CalaPoint folks was talking about I think it was for their condo building or one of their condo buildings that they had to replace some portion of the septic system, a fairly expensive portion of it. And they claim they did that out of their own funds. And I wonder, I mean, my main question with the rates that we have in front of us is this capital surcharge, what the customers are getting for it, and really understanding what the PUD is covering, because I'm comfortable with the postage stamp concept with the water systems. I'm not comfortable with it yet with these septic systems, partly because we have so few, and it almost seems like we have different contractual relationships with, or different understandings of what we're doing with them. So could you talk a little bit about, if you recall that conversation or that comment about the work they did, and if you could characterize, if you know what it was and why we didn't pay for it? Because it seems like what we're talking about with CalaPoint is that we are covering repairs like that.
Yes, and so I did speak to Randy after the meeting and kind of went over what was discussed. But there was a system that we did believe was the PUD system, and we went in to investigate and to look into it, and it happened to end up being not one that the PUD owned. So there are on-site septic systems within CalaPoint that the PUD doesn't own. So I'm not supposed to make assumptions because that was my New Year resolution, but that is my, and I'm going to do it right now, but that is my assumption that I know in that case, it was not a system that we owned. So if it was a recent example that he gave, and I can always call him and find out for sure, but if it's from a recent past of less than 4 months ago, it ended up not being a PUD system.
Okay. That's interesting that we would have had somebody from CalaPoint confused as to who was maintaining their septic system. So I don't know if there's a way to track down who made the comment or what specifically that was, but that would be helpful for me to know for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Is that you, Bill?
It is, Bill County.
I'll give you your 3
Look,
minutes. You didn't
the
weigh
P-
in at public comment.
I'm sorry?
I'll give you 3 minutes, Bill.
Okay, it's certainly been the PUD's position in the past that they are not responsible for major preparers at CalaPoint. As far as I know, any of the systems that they manage, it is just a management thing. And it's certainly the case that the people here assume that that's the case. And that they figured that any major repairs like the replacement of the drain field would be our responsibility, the people here. So now, and I know that at least in one of the cases, there's money maintained at the county for this that people here have put into it. So I'm really a little bit confused by this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Back to you, Samantha.
Oh, it's a good point. There is money in with Kevin's. Okay, I could share those amounts with the commissioners, and there is separate amounts for each of the systems that we do maintain as the PUD. And so, and that's the part that it's an interesting point. What you're bringing up, Bill, is what the system is that has the issue. And then is it the PUDs to be responsible for? And really, I know Randy knows, but really digging in and making sure that we all are on the same page from the PUD as well as the homeowners who live in that area. So that they understand either if they're managed by the PUD or they're not.
This seems like a big issue to me.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, to replace a drain field, one of these common drain fields is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially.
So Bill, I think this is part of the granular conversation that Kevin will bring to Kayla Point. If we could maybe move on at this point. I know we have a lot on the agenda tonight.
Yeah, so Dan, if I could just weigh in here for Samantha's benefit. So Samantha, before I'm going to be comfortable voting on these rates that has a capital surcharge for septics, I got to know the answer to this. And
Okay.
I hear you dancing around a little bit because I think, yeah, I don't know that you've firsthand got all the information. We have to find out what work was done at Kala Point. We have to find out, was it one of the systems we've been maintaining? And we have to be able to give a solid answer to the people in Kala Point as to what their rates cover. It's just a little too squishy what I'm hearing. And so that's what I'm going to need before I'm comfortable voting on the rates for the wastewater. Thanks.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Oh, I understand I understand the comment.
So do you have more presentations, Samantha?
Nope, that is everything.
Okay.
And if I can comment here, I'm in the same position as Commissioner Randall, that I would like to have clarification on what the PUD is specifically responsible for, what the PUD owns at Cala Point, and what is owned by the residents, because that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree, gentlemen. I think Kevin was probably, that's what he was alluding to earlier on. There was still a little more research to do, a little more work to be done before we tackle this thing too deep into the weeds, and that Kayla Point is going to get its own little presentation.
Exactly. And I think if it takes going to the health department and finding what work was done there, because sometimes some of this stuff can feel like a needle in a haystack if we're not totally aware of what they're talking about. We just, we need to find out, was work done? Whose system was it? Ideally, what did it cost? Did we pay for it? Did we not? Just because this is a big deal, and Kala Point in kind of a unique position in terms of the systems that we took over from them. So I think we deserve to give them the facts and for them to know what's going on.
Anything further on this topic? All right, Kevin, it's back to you, I think.
Okay. Oh, hold on.
Okay.
So we're going to go down to the electric rate update, residential base and usage comparison. So in the packet, we sent out basically a spreadsheet that took the increase in base rate and moved it to consumption. And with that, we also had Jean look at the consumption specifically to low income, and she did a comparison on low income consumption versus base rate. So Jean, do you want to jump into your low income versus the standard residential rate increase?
Sure, and I'm just gonna share my screen. I put together some slides from the Word report that's in the packet just to help us through this. Maybe I will. It feels like Monday all over again. Slideshow.
Just wait till you get your hands on that big screen TV in the new conference room.
That would be nice, I think. All right, no more of this junk. All right, screen 2. Share. Okay, can everybody see that graph, the 2019 low income customer data?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just gonna follow along with the report. So during discussions about rates for electricity, there's been concerns raised. Are we promoting conservation enough? Should we increase consumption rates versus base rates? And if we do either of those, how is that going to affect our low income customers? So before we can answer that question, you have to understand the difference in usage between a standard residential customer and a low income customer. So I looked at data for the last several years, and I pulled up 2019 because it has some of the highest averages for both of those rates. And you'll notice my averages are a little different from FCS, but that's because I've drilled down into the data and I'm not looking at an overall average. So this is just the numbers for low income versus standard residential. If you notice here, we're going to use February 2019 for this data just because it was the highest average. For low income, the average usage was 1,562, and the average usage for the standard residential was 1616. And if you look, one of the things I want to point out is that the kWh usage for standard maxed out at about 12,000, and it was just under 8,000 for low income folks. Don't know, I can't put an exact reason on why, but we can speculate a lot on that. So looking at the low income summary block.
So Gene, before you get on this, is it safe to assume that this is the information that staff and FCS used to determine the third tier for the 1600 breaking point on kilowatt hours?
Yes. So, but FCS was a little bit different from that because they looked at an overall average over several years. And because I'm looking at potential impact, I've really drilled in, but it's going to be very similar to what FCS pulled for that third tier.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So if you look specifically at that top tier, which is about 40% of the low income customers would fall into that third tier range. It's really a gradual incline until you hit about 3,000 kWh, and then it jumps up. But there's fewer customers at that end of the scale than there are in the first two tiers put together. So, well, the first three tiers before the 3,000. The curve is relatively the same for standard residential usage. About 45% versus 40% fall into that third tier. Again, with the heaviest users being just a handful at the top of that scale. When you put dollars to that at current rates, for the low income, an average bill with the discount is about $134.89. And a person at the top of that usage chart would be about $810. For standard residential rates, the average is about $180 a month versus the $134 for low income. And at the maximum end of that scale, it's about $1,300 versus the $800. So there's a pretty significant difference there.
So Gene, this is Commissioner Tupper. Could you remind me how the 3950 breaks out? Is it a portion of that on base rate, or does it all go against consumption? How do we determine that 3950?
It's just a flat 3950 credit applied to the bill. If a customer uses less than, if their overall bill was less than 3950 for base and consumption, they would be billed a credit amount and that credit would build through the year. So flat rate.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I've taken that usage summary and broken it down for the whole year so that you can really see the trends. And the trends are about the same. And this is just another way to look at it. If you look at that February, again, here's the 40% of folks in that third tier. The bulk of them will be here in the second tier. And only 12% are able to stay below that second tier. And this is for standard. It is about the same, except there's a higher amount in both. Well, it's just a different distribution, but there are still less than 20% in this bottom tier. So comparing the rates, the proposed rates, this is based on the original proposal from FCS, which would have the base rate increase up to $28.50 by 2024. And it would also introduce that third tier, which would be just under 13 cents per kWh in 2024. So low income standard or average usage, about 140.83 compared to the 941 maximum. And you can see the comparisons here between just standard and low income. It's about $60 difference at the lower end, slightly more at the top end. And you start to see more of an increase here as you get into the option for consumption rate, leaving the base fee at $18.50 and putting a higher rate on the tiers up to just over 15 cents per kWh for that third tier. And this low income discount is still based on the proposal made by FCS, which is tied to the base fee. There's more on that later though. So reducing the low income by 60, they still have about 141 versus 209. And at the maximum end, 1,100 to 1,800. And then the third puts more of, it still leaves the base fee at $18.50, but it reduces the impact on that third tier and puts most of the impact on that second tier. So moving on to just a comparison for the low income folks for the different scenarios. What that is with the base fee increase, bills for low income average use would be $140.83. For consumption rate increase, scenario 1, it would jump to 141. And scenario 2 is 144. If you go based on the max usage, which is where we're going to see the highest impact on these folks, they're jumping from 941. And then for scenario 1, their bill would go from 941 to 1,100. And then 1050-ish for scenario 2. And that's with putting most of the burden of that increase on tier 2. So with that, the low income customers that are in that highest tier, which is about 40% of low income customers, could see potentially a 36% increase in their bill based on the highest scenario here.
So Jean, as what was that percentage? There's like 750 low income customers, and how many would fall into that category?
About 40%.
If the tier didn't force them to start thinking about conservation and nothing changed and all things being equal, how many people is that?
Well, we're at 736 now, so 40% of that. Gosh, it's after 5, Dan.
About 400 people, or I mean 300 people probably then. So, okay.
Yeah, it's about 300.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, that's my math. That's a rough estimate too. So,
I needed a calculator. So, but that's 300 of our low income customers. That's a lot of them. So there's other considerations to make. We can look at if the board does decide to go with the option of increasing the consumption rate rather than the base fee, we may want to look at other discount types for low income folks, maybe a percentage of the consumption charge versus a flat rate. There's a lot of different things that we can consider to help them out. The other thing that would need to be considered are the budgetary considerations. The growth in the program has just been astronomical over the last couple of years. And by 2024, if we're looking at that $60 per consumer discount on just the electric, when you include admin costs and water and sewer in with that, we could be looking at over $1 million a year budgetary need for that. So those are just things that we need to talk about. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Gene, this is Jeff. Could you just repeat what you just said? You talked about growth and what are we currently at right now? And then you jumped to $1 million, and that was a little shocking to me. What was your assumption on where we're at now and how it would get to $1 million? Could you please restate that?
Sure. Let me get my screen back. Okay. So if you look back at the beginning of the program back in 2017, when we went live with this new low income program, we had less than 500 people. Over the last few years, there are now 736 folks alone getting that $39.50 electrical discount, and that's not including the water and sewer. And that has pushed us up close to maybe just over the $500,000 that was originally considered. If we go with FCS flat rate of the $60 by 2024, and we look at the program growth as a consistent 10% per year, that could push the budgetary requirement to over $1 million a year.
Okay, thank you. I get that. And I guess the one thing I would urge us to consider is, I think a lot of that growth of the low income program was people becoming aware of it over those first few years. And it would be interesting to see as the program becomes more mature and more people become aware of it, if it continues to grow in terms of numbers. I can totally see how it's going to grow in terms of cost as we increase the credit available. But it'd be interesting to see if it starts to flatline a little bit based on, the people aware of it and are enrolled, as opposed to the first couple of years when there was, probably considerable growth as people were unaware of how much that it existed and it was better than, it used to be.
And if you look before COVID, do you see the same rate of increase?
I do. It actually slowed down a little bit over the previous year.
And if I can sneak in another question, what do we know about the number of people who are approaching, low-income people who are approaching that maximum usage? Is that one or two outliers, or are there people, low-income folks who are consuming more than 5,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per month? I mean, that just jumps out at me as an unusually high figure.
Yeah, it's about 15, 20 folks that are in that ultra high usage level.
And do we know anything about them as to why they're consuming so much electricity?
Well, without doing an energy audit or polling the customer, I would really only be speculating. I mean, it could be their home has a leaky envelope. Maybe they have old outdated appliances or furnaces. Maybe they turn the heat up to 90 and leave the window open. I don't know. So that's where, an energy audit would be helpful.
I agree.
Yeah, and I guess from my time when I was looking at people's power bills as part of my solar job, one of the things that oftentimes took a power consumption number very high was a hot tub. Electric hot tubs would oftentimes double the consumption in a home. But yeah, that's a incredibly high number. That 5,000 kilowatt hours a month is like 166 kilowatt hours a day, and the average is like 30 to 35 for a residential home. But so Gene, I guess I have a question too. I mean, you did a great job on answering the question, which is what would the impacts of the different rate structures we're looking at be upon our low-income residential customers, and how do the low-income residential customers differ, if any, from kind of the standard customers? The one question, and I think it's related to what Commissioner Collins is bringing up, is what are we doing right now to try and, because what we're talking about is making a customer's bill cheaper by lowering what we collect. So the question I have is, what are we doing? What can we do to help that customer use less electricity? Basically, use our rebate programs for improvements, and this new idea of having a financing option that we could utilize through federal money, like Opalco is doing, where we have our own program where people can borrow the money to make the necessary improvements, whether that's a heat pump or whether that's insulation or whether that's whatever, to lower their bills. So to what extent are we talking to our low-income customers about this issue of what help we have?
We could do better. Right now, it's just on a basis of, why is my bill so high? And we walk through the steps of, well, what kind of furnace do you have? We go through and we talk about it. We give them tips on how they can save. But really, I'm going to go back to the energy audit, the home audit. I think that and I have lots of ideas, but I don't want to monopolize the time. But I think if we could start a program that was really geared more towards fixing the problem, towards a solution, rather than slapping a stack of cash on it, I think that if we had a program that did energy audits and weatherization, I think that would be a really great step forward.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as you talk about the total budget numbers, and this is kind of for my fellow commissioners, when we look at the money that's out there, that's basically 0% interest loans, and we could look at other utilities that are starting programs like this, we're throwing cash at this anyway. Why not throw cash at it in a way that fixes the home's energy usage? Because those numbers are shockingly high. And I just kind of wonder if they're just like literally uninsulated homes with really inefficient heating systems, which, in this county, they have to exist, based on the age of our housing and so forth. So thank you. And I think we're doing everything we can with the rates. At some point, we're going to need to look at some other solutions to help our customers.
So Gene, we've gotten a little bit off track, but since we're on this tangent, could you maybe talk a little bit to the point of the how we interact with the local action groups and, you know, maybe what is in their bailiwick as opposed to what really is in our bailiwick?
Well, the biggest, most, well, OLICAP. We do refer customers to OLICAP quite frequently, daily. And OLICAP does have weatherization programs, but there's not a lot of availability. And as far as that, I mean, that's about it, is just OLICAP.
Okay, so
Gene, can I jump in real quick to help with this
go
one?
ahead. Go ahead.
Because Gene and I have been working on this. I've been helping out with the energy efficiency program. This is Will talking. And we spent a lot of time on the phone with OLICAP trying to figure out a way to make it easier for low-income customers to access the energy efficiency improvements and incentives for their homes. It's very complex. OLICAP has a complex system. It's hard to work through. It was hard for us to work through it on the phone. But what OLICAP offers is 100% financing. And when they come to us to use our programs, unless there's a contractor that is willing to forego payment until the rebate is received, the customer needs to have the funding up front. And that presents a significant barrier for many customers. So that's kind of the challenge we've run into. I have been hoping, as I've kind of helped shepherd the energy efficiency program this last year, to do more and more low-income rebates, but it's really complicated to do. We've only managed to do 2, and part of that is because you have to have a contractor that's willing to do all of the work and not get paid for months at a time. There's not a lot of contractors that want to do that. So I think there's a lot of work we can do to help out, but we faced some hurdles here. I just wanted to illuminate some of that.
So this is a topic that's going to have to be discussed and addressed after, you know, we probably look at the rates. In my opinion, I think we've drawn the rates out almost a year now, and this is a discussion that's obviously complicated, came up as a word a couple times. So I think we'll get off this topic for the moment. Since we do take public questions at this point, I see Bill Putney has a chat room question there. Gene, can you read that, or you want me to read it?
Oh, let me see if I can click it.
He says, is there going to be a different knee in the rate chart for homes with EVs in relations to the rate discussion we had previously before we got into the low income?
Oh, I don't know. Kevin, do you want to take that?
I will take that. I do think staff's going to come back with an EV recommendation, but it needs to come a little bit later down the road. For example, during the meter and some of those discussions, it makes it a lot easier to implement an EV solution. But I do think that will be part of the rate structure, and it will be multi-tiered. It will not only be for residential chargers, but level 2 chargers and some other things. It will be more comprehensive than just a residential rate.
Thanks. So Kevin and Gene, is there anything else in the electric rates update that you guys wanted to touch on? I think we probably spent quite a bit of time on this. The issues we just got done talking about, you know, I know that they're part of rates, but I see them being a post adoption, you know, when we decide what we're going to do. We can always, you know, this is the thing with whatever proposal we move forward with on rate increases, we can adjust that. You know, we can forestall, you know, an increase down the road if we see the metrics to show that, you know, we don't need to do it. So, or as new things move into the system, like low income concerns or EVs. So again, I think these are discussions better for a better day than today. So if there's no other questions, I'd like us to move on.
Dan, can I just visit a little bit with the board specifically?
Go ahead, go ahead, Kevin.
So this is the last little piece that Gene did. We've shown the low income. We've shown kind of some different scenarios. So staff will be bringing back to the board a recommendation to move forward with the electric rates. And we do agree with you, Dan, that this is something that can be reviewed at different times, but we will bring forward, recommendations to move forward with the rates and try to finalize everything as soon as possible. Our goal would be to have the rates in effect in July. So we did feel this is an important piece, though, to look at what Gene presented today.
So commissioners, last call on this one. Any further questions or discussion?
I really want to compliment Gene and Will and anyone else who's not been identified, who helped develop the charts and the graphs. It makes it very comprehensive, and that's the kind of rate modeling I think that we need to look at to understand what are perhaps some of the unintended consequences of our taking a particular course of action. So again, thank you very much for your good work.
This is Jeff. So are we going to move past the, there's also this chart we have of the scenario 1 and scenario 2. Are we going to talk about that at all, or are we going to move past that at this time?
So in a nutshell, what they tried to show on those charts is whatever the base rate increase was, they moved it down to consumption. So it really doesn't change the rates because it's based on the average consumption. We can get into a discussion on it, Jeff, but you have to go so many decimals out. We're talking dollars,
Right.
couple dollar rate. So that was just part of some of the information that Gene used. So that's why it was in the packet.
Okay. And I guess where are we going with the rate discussion? This has been a great update and a deep dive into the low income issue. Where do you see us going next with the electric rates, Kevin?
We will put together a presentation very similar like we did for water. And we will sit down with the board and say, okay, this is the option that staff recommends moving forward. Can we get a yes vote on it? And it may have to come back twice, but we will bring it up, and it will be kind of based on the last information we got from FCS. We will get it out in plenty of time for everyone before the board meeting. I don't know if it will be next board meeting, but if not the next one, it'll be the first one in June to really kind of zero in and get the commissioners, tweak this one thing, and then staff, we can have you move forward.
Sure. So Dan, I don't know if other commissioners would like to weigh in. I think it might be nice just for staff's purposes for us to say a little bit about where we stand, because we've been given a lot of information.
Excellent.
We're kind of down to a few issues, and just for and I know Commissioner Collins has a letter he's put together that he may want to address some of these things. But for my own purposes, when I look at these two scenarios, and there may not be support from the other commissioners to reduce the base charge, but as I look at them, the scenario 2 spreads the load the most evenly and has the least differences with the overall impact of the bill compared to raising the base rate. So if we were to consider something, I would favor looking at scenario 2 or that sort of logic. But I have a bigger and a different question. And I feel like we have done everything we possibly can to minimize the impact of these needed rate increases to the categories that are the most sensitive, which are the residential customers and the public schools. I think we've done a really good job of trying to herd in the consultants on fine-tuning the rate structure to work for our county and our customers. The one issue that I wonder about, and Kevin, you kind of hinted at this a little bit, is when we have good years and as our consumption goes up, the revenues are better than we expect. And what I anticipate is that our revenues and our sales are going to keep going up. And you talked a little bit about we can tighten our belts a little bit on the capital stuff. And this is a multi-year rate increase proposal that we're looking at, this model. And the one thing that jumps out to me is, I'm looking at the percentages here. So on these charts, we've got the percentage increase in the rates from 21, 22, 23, and 24. And in 2022, basically 2021, we have 3.16% increase. 2022, it jumps up to 7.23. 2023, it drops down to 3.66, and then 2024, 3.65. So I think when we, and I've been looking at the comment letters we're getting, and as I also looked at the PSE rates, because that's what we would have if we hadn't jumped into this PUD experiment. And up and through 2022, our rates are still right at PSE's rates. So if somebody wants to say that our rates are a lot more expensive than PSE, well, no, they're not, because their tier rates are pretty much the same as the rates we're showing there through 2022, with the exception of the base rate's a bit more expensive. And we can say, well, we've got a loan that we're paying off that PSE doesn't, and that costs the customers about $25 a month. But so the question I have is, if we could hold that 2022 rate increase to basically the same as 2023 and 2024, roughly 3.5% or 3.6%, whatever that is, to me, that just tells the customers that we're doing our best to not only provide good service and everything, but we're also trying to hold the cost down a little bit, because that's kind of what inflation runs at. And a 7% increase to me it sounds like it's higher than what you commonly get with utilities. And I guess I'm wondering if we could change that to more of a 3.6% for that year, and see how things go. See if our sales are going up, see if we can just squeeze our capital improvements just a wee bit to make that work. And then we've always got the year after 2024, if we need to add on a little bit more to keep things balanced and to keep the money in the bank at a good enough level. So that's just kind of a question for us. We've been looking at shifting things around, but the one thing we haven't looked at is, can we tighten our belts just a little bit and see how revenues from sales go? So I guess that's a question for you, Kevin. What's your thoughts on that?
So I'm always going to say we can tighten our belts. We need to tighten our belts. One of the reasons, Jeff, that the 7-point increase is in year 2 kind of goes back to a traditional rate increase. Usually your first year, you jump up quite a bit because you haven't jumped up for a while. And so that 7 and the 3 that we have this year, those are kind of flopped just because of the COVID and stuff like that. So yes, I don't have a problem dropping that 7 down to a 3.6. I am going to try to push you up to a 4.6, maybe just a wee bit more, because we don't know. But yes, those are all very doable, very easy, and you are correct. We can monitor through the next 2 years and see what needs to be on that 3rd year or 4th year. So that's very easy to do.
Okay, well, I'm just going to leave it at that. This is a multi-year proposal. Lots of things can happen in years ahead. It's a projection, but I would just put my vote down for when you come back with the next round of information. I think we're getting really close, but that's one I don't think we've looked at. Could we tighten up year 2 a little bit as within the numbers that you're talking about, and see what the effects are? And I think we'd be showing our customers that we're doing the best we can.
So I'm going to give a bit of a spoiler alert. I'm pretty much stuck with the FCF original proposal. We have, if you took all the base rate now that we take from everybody, commercial and residential, it's 4.5 million. That doesn't even meet our debt of 6 million in a year. So the RUS training that we just completed really pointed out a lot of things to me that I hadn't looked at or thought out from the numbers standpoints before. And I think it's better to go with this proposal and back off as we go than to to get someplace further down the road, a year, 2, 3 years, and say, oh, yeah, no, we got to raise it more than we said we were going to raise it. So it's like, I'd rather reduce it. And I think in good faith that we will do that, that if we see the metrics from what the 4-year proposal is, if we're ahead of the curve, that we will probably more than likely reduce the rates, you know, anything unforeseen that we can't tell about. And I think Kevin was right. You know, we softened it already. I mean, there's already been some compromise and some back and forth to get to where we are now with this proposal from where FCS originally started. So, you know, for me, I think I've got all the information I need at this point. I'm not saying that there isn't something I could have overlooked and that maybe that'll come up at the next time around when we get a presentation, but I'm pretty well fixed on how I want to approach this.
So if I can weigh in, I like the idea of the incremental raises being equivalent with each other. And I think there's an opportunity for some compromise here, that if the rates go up by 4.5% each year, you wind up with the same, by the end of 2024, the same 18% increase. But there isn't an outlier year that has a double increase compared to the previous year or the following year.
Is that it, Ken?
Yes.
So Jeff, do you need any more at this point, or Kevin, anything further? Again, like I said, I don't know how much more we want to beat this around.
Could I just, one quick question? Jeff likes scenario 2. Dan likes it as is. So as is, we kind of split between base and consumption. Jeff's scenario 2 is we put the consumption and left the base the same. Ken, do you have a preference one way or the other there, or kind of split the baby also?
I do, yes.
Ken, if I could real quick, Kevin, didn't we get some information also that going on consumption affects the low income?
Yeah, that's what Gene's whole report was, that the 40% does hit the low income.
So if I can reference the article that I had written, and also what the point that Dan made earlier, the cost of paying on the loan and interest, plus the cost of maintaining the infrastructure, comes out to be about $70 per person or per residence, per customer, I guess. And that's way more than our base rate. So I think it has to be balanced between consumption and the base rate. I think that is fair, and I think we're obligated to find the fairest approach to rate setting that we're capable of doing.
What you're saying, Ken, is the cost of service is for those is $70, and our base rate is only $18.50 now. So I would argue that we're already probably imbalanced on consumption rates versus base rate. Our base rate needs to be higher. I mean, that's the conclusion you come to when you start to do the math. And I'm a firm believer that everybody has skin in the game as owners, as customer owners, that at a minimum, our base rates should at least be covering our debt service of $6 million. And right now it doesn't. It only covers it at 14.5 million, or excuse me, 4.5 million. So I don't think it's meant to be crickets, Kevin. Do you have anything further? Or?
No, I'm taking some notes. I'm sorry. Well,
you asked the last question and we've all weighed in. We had a proposal 1, a proposal 2, and Ken was I'm not exactly sure where Ken wound up.
I was taking notes, so I do apologize. I have some notes to myself. We'll have something for the next board meeting, just for everybody to chew on.
So if I can clarify what my position is, and that is to balance the increases between the base rate and the consumption rate, and also to smooth out those increases over the 4-year period of time. So my suggestion would be that we increase the rates by effectively 4.5% per year for each of those years. I know we have some catch up to do, but I think that that is a reasonable approach to the rate increases.
So anything else on the electric rate update? It looks like we've come to the conclusion of that discussion. There's nothing in the chat. So we will move on to item 5.3, material costs. Oh, wait, someone.
Yeah, wait a minute. Am I unmuted?
Go ahead, Roger. 3 minutes.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like scenario 1. I think that's a concern for people with electric cars that who use more electricity for conservation purposes. I don't like the years there. I would change the years. I'm a big believer that we should raise rates as needed. I don't like the idea of raising the base. I would go right ahead to 2022 with the first one, and they look good to me, but I don't like the years. I would just only do them as needed. We have no idea what we're going to need in any one year. So I guess that's the way I'd look at it. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. So yeah, I like the consistency. You know, FCS, we spent $100,000 so far on this study, and it makes sense to me to, you know, set a path of 4 years. Everybody can see it in front of them, what it's going to look like. And if we decide that we don't need to do it in 2022, 23, 24, we cut back and we just don't do it. But it seems to me to have a path of cost of service that they've shown us and told us this is what we need to run our business and not lose money. You know, I think I agree with Roger in a sense. We need to look at this year to year, if I heard Roger right.
Hey, Dan.
Could I say one more thing?
Yeah, Roger, you had another minute.
There's no in the real world, there's no relation between fixed charges and fixed costs. I think that's one of those really poor arguments that it's a pun, a bad pun at best. You could also say embedded charges and embedded costs, I suppose, but it doesn't mean anything. It's like one of those things like driving season or trickle down. It's these terms that don't really mean anything, and you only hear them when somebody's going to stick it to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, nobody likes to raise rates. Anyone that thinks that we're taking any joy in having to do anything that we've been doing with water, septic, and the electric rates, this is a tough process and tough decisions. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Dan, thanks, Dan. So Kevin and Joel, I imagine there's 2 different ways that we could take action on the rates when we get to the point that we're taking action. And one way would be to adopt a resolution which adopts rates for 2022, 2023, 2024. And another way would be to, on an annual basis, actually say, okay, for 2022, here's what the rates are going to be. And then the following year, have another opportunity to act on a second resolution after we get an update. Okay, here's what revenues were, here's what costs were. The next year, we could adopt another resolution implementing the recommendations of FCS and what we intend to do, but it would give us an opportunity to verify that before we actually put it in action. So does that make sense? Either one resolution that does a multi-year action that we would have to undo through a resolution, or we do it 1 year at a time with a resolution and verify that things are the way they are before we adopt the next year's resolution. Could you comment on that?
Yeah. Do you want me to go ahead, Kevin?
Um,
Go ahead. I can follow.
let me jump in first. What I would prefer is the 4-year, but we could make a statement in there that it would be reviewed at budget time, because we are doing a lot of long-term planning and financial forecasting for a 10-year period. So if we could just use these estimates going out, not that we have to do them, but it gives us more information to look at long-term planning. So if it would be agreeable, it's easier for staff if we could approve them and then have a review, even state there would be a review at budget season, so, something like that.
Okay. And that, and that makes sense, because that's kind of what we're, isn't that what we do for RUS is 4-year plans?
Yeah.
So a 4-year rate structure, it does make sense, but I like the idea of us reviewing it and verifying, because lots of things can happen on both ends.
And just historically, I think the PUD has adopted a rate schedule, and that's the rates. And that there's times like, I think we came in maybe a year or two ago and looked at the school rate and adjusted that. And so there's always opportunities to go back and visit it. So.
Hey, commissioners, anything else for staff or?
Yeah, I guess I'm just hoping that Kevin if you got the sense of this, you want to keep this moving along. I think you heard kind of where our remaining questions are and what additional information we need before we can vote on stuff. I think we're getting really close.
Yeah, thank you.
And I like the idea of setting the rates for 4 years and then reviewing at budget time to see what has changed, because lots can change.
Yeah, with all the state and federal money and new programs out there, we don't know where money could or may come from, and that there may be some saving graces out there. The federal legislation on lowering our interest rate on our loan, that's back in the frying pan again. So that, that was tagged at $1 million a year that could save us. That could make a big impact there. That's more than what the base rate increase. So I think we just need to play this out and take it one budget cycle at a time, but have a plan set to follow so that everybody can see what we're doing. All right, so are we ready to move on to 5.3? Material.
Phew, yes, 5.3.
Aren't you glad I said we were going to take us somewhere, Kevin?
I am grateful for the breaks we're going to take. So I don't know, we were talking material costs a couple meetings ago, and the board requested an update on material. So Scott Bancroft is going to jump in and visit a little bit about costs and how they've gone up in the last several months or years. So Scott, jump in.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to cut this a little short because we're going through the time here real quick. But Allie Dean helped me put together some costs of some of the main materials that we use at the PUD. And I had a little more of a list, but I'm just going to cut it basically down to 4-inch conduit items and 3 vaults that we use quite often, just for time purposes. And you'll get the gist after I go through this. So we took these numbers and we compiled them, and we tried to come up with the best way to show an apples to apples difference between cost now and in the past. So I'm going to go through those right now. So in December 2020, 4-inch conduit was $2.83 per foot. In June of 2019, that same 4-inch conduit was $1.41 per foot, a difference of $1.42. Now, the big thing that we really need to look at here, in 2020, the lead time for the 4-inch conduit was 11 weeks. And in 2019, we had it in stock available to us at any time. Big differences there. Now, if we go to 4-inch 90-degree sweeps, In January of 2021, we bought sweeps for $38.59. In June of 2019, we bought 4-inch sweeps, 90-degree sweeps for $5.77. That's a difference of $32.82. The lead time in January 2021 is 2 weeks. The lead time in 2019, they were in stock, available anytime we want them. Okay, so we'll sneak down to 4-inch, 45-degree fittings. In January of 2021, one of these fittings cost $12.89. In September of 2019, one of these 45-degree fittings cost $5.79, a difference of $7.10. Difference in lead times, 4 weeks in 2021, 2 weeks in 2019. 4-inch, 22.5-degree fittings in March of 2021 cost $17.70. In June of 2019, those same fittings cost $6.69, a difference of $11 and a penny. Our vaults, I'm going to skip into the main 3 vaults that we use. We use a 575 LA vault at the PUD for electrical, and in August of 2020, for the base and the lid, it cost $3,445. In March of 2019, that same vault, base and lid, cost $3,195, a difference of about $250. In 2020, the lead time was 2 weeks. And in 2019, they had them in stock. You'd call anytime, they just bring them to you the next day. The other big purchase that we have is 444 LA vaults. That's an electrical vault, and we do use it in some instances in fiber use also. But in March of 2021, the cost for one of those for base and lid was $1,940. In March of 2019, that same vault cost $1,700, a difference of $240. The lead time in 2021 was 11 weeks. The lead time in 2019 was in stock. So you could call up, they'd have it to you within a couple of days. The other big vault that we use is the pen cell vault. That's used for fiber and some electric instances like in sidewalks and whatnot. In January 2021, we bought a pen cell vault for a total price of $1,445. And in March of 2020, that same vault cost $1,214. The lead time in 2021 was 11 weeks, and the lead time in 2020 was 6 weeks. And the cost difference for that was $231. Now, there are a lot of things. These are commodity items because, for instance, in the 90-degree sweeps, the whole list that we have, it's a full gamut of. On January of 2019, they were selling for $44.67. In September of 2019, they were selling for $6.26. A lot of factors come in. In 2019, a resin factory in Alabama burned down, so that raised the cost of those fittings dramatically.
Scott,
yes, sir.
Could you or Kevin maybe put into context or into perspective a little bit? When you talk about vaults, that's one thing, but you might have anywhere from 4 to 16 sweeps going in and out of a vault. So could you kind of put some perspective to those numbers? Is there any way you guys can do that as to what volume we move in this kind of stuff on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis?
Would you like me to put something together?
And that's keeping the fact that not looking at anything we're going to be doing extra with broadband moving forward.
Right, correct. So just for instance, just a quickie here, we did a job down at the port that took 22 90-degree sweeps, 4-inch. And that would be a cost of $848 just for the sweeps for that job. And if we'd have done that same job in 2019, it would have been $126.
Right. So thanks. That's a good enough example to show the perspective on just because there's one vault, we can't equate everything one for one. That's my point. Yes. Is that these volumes are going to vary, and some of the volumes are going to be in a place where you don't really think about it, and it's an exorbitant cost that we have to do.
Yes,
If I can come in here, I appreciate the overall point that you're making. What I would find particularly useful is an aggregation of material costs. How much has the cost of materials gone up year to year to year as an aggregate rather than individual items? Because I don't know, being a layperson, what the volume is on different pieces of material. And I don't need to know that, but what would be helpful is understanding how much material costs have escalated over a particular period of time.
Roger that.
And this is Jeff. And I guess the other thought I have as you talk about this stuff is, to some extent, I'm sure these are costs that may be associated with work we have to do on our own equipment, and there's nobody to bill. But to the extent that these are projects where we get aid and construction money coming in, if we are passing these costs along, yes, it's costing our customers more, but how much is that really affecting our budget in terms of needing to increase our rates? So in conjunction with Ken's comment, if you could also do a little analysis in terms of making us aware that this is really increasing the cost to the customer. It's going to increase the construction cost, but that money ultimately would then come back to us covering our costs, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just writing as you speak, so. All right, when would you like that? When would you like that, commissioners?
Well, I guess my question is, what are we being asked to do? I mean, you're giving us a heads up that material costs are going up and delivery times are getting extended out. Is this kind of an overall kind of budget heads up, or what's kind of the goal of giving us the update?
To me, it was just to kind of let you all know that how much things are going up in cost. These are just, I cut it real short because these are just basic material items that we use a lot of. And I cut it a little bit short because we're running out of time, but it was just kind of give you a heads up on, hey, things are costing. And they've gone up and down. It's been very, very sporadic, the commodity markets on the conduit. It's been up and down for the last 2 years dramatically. And we've got to get better at how we purchase, and we got to try to buy more at the lower prices and keep it a little longer in stock and inventory, just for that reason. Because if we wait, we might find ourselves paying 3 times the amount through a procurement process, and we got to be heads up.
Or not being able to get the items, period.
Yeah, and I guess I remember when we had our RUS training, the bean counters were really hammering us on how long we had stuff in inventory, basically saying, this is wasted money. You've got money tied up in stuff that's sitting there. And the point you're making is there can be a tremendous amount of volatility in pricing, and it might make sense to buy a little bit more at a time when prices are reasonable. So that makes sense. But I guess, Scott, to the extent that you come back to us, I think Ken's point is a good one. Talking a little bit about the overall budget or the overall expenses in the aggregate and what they can range for totals. And then for my question, it's when we're buying supplies, roughly how much of that is then billed to a customer versus how much is billed basically to ourselves, if that makes sense. Is that would. Thank you.
And Scott, if you can have that information for us between now and the next board meeting, if that is possible, that would be great.
You got it.
So Jeff, I guess it's been a year and a half since you took the RUS training. The paradigm has switched. Our trainer told us that this is the way it is now, that we need to be looking out further. We do need to be holding inventory longer. So it's amazing how much your training changed just in, I don't know, it was a year and a half. How long ago it was that you took it? I don't know what Ken heard, but that's what I heard, that this paradigm kind of changed.
I think COVID really interrupted basically material and supply issues. I heard a friend who's going to Hawaii, and basically the cost of renting a car there is ridiculous right now because literally the rental companies got rid of their cars because they didn't have any visitors, and now they got no cars and they can't get any cars. So I mean, this is we're entering new times. I mean, climate change can affect this stuff. Economic impacts can affect this stuff. So I think we're little Jefferson PUD out here on the Olympic Peninsula. We probably need to have a little better supply of stuff than somebody closer to the plant. So, but I really appreciate the presentation and the information.
Yeah. So Scott, same here. I really appreciate what you're doing here. I understand what you're doing, why you're doing it. Good job, good information. Kevin, did you want to weigh in at all anymore, or?
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Allie, for helping me out.
All right. So any other further questions on the material costs? All right. So I think we will move on to old business. For the old and new business section discussions, please hold public comment until each presentation is done, but before there is a vote. With that, 6.1, CAB meeting agenda.
We met and had a metering presentation last week. The exact same metering presentation I'm recommending be given to the CAB. They did make a couple changes per the commissioner's request, and then the CAB, there's a couple things we need to discuss. Do we want this a joint meeting so all three commissioners are there at the CAB meeting when we discuss meters this first go around? Or do you want to put some guidelines together today and just a single commissioner goes to the CAB meeting? And then there was a little bit of comment on our last meeting on should the metering presentation be full CAB board or just subcommittee would act on it. So there was a lot of questions that came up at the metering and how to involve the CAB and how to move forward. The next CAB meeting is at 2 o'clock on Monday. And so we said we would bring it back here for some discussion, and we're trying to get an idea of what the commissioners want to see. The one thing I will say is the presentation is going to be very similar to what you saw last time. The only changes will be what guidance the commissioners gave FCS to do the presentation. So I guess we could start there. Do all three commissioners want to go, or do you want to set guidelines at this meeting and then I believe it's Dan's turn to be the commissioner. Is that correct, Don? So
yeah, and I don't have a preference, Kevin. I'll just start by saying I don't have a preference whether we do a joint meeting or not. With the other two commissioners, think about the 2 or 3 questions you brought up there before we throw it to Dawn and Jess. Maybe it'll help them to hear us what we're thinking. Ken, Jeff, any preference as to how far you want to push this out for a joint meeting?
Well, I'll just jump in. I know that various CAB members have been asking for a joint meeting for a while. And if we're going to talk or answer questions about what the CAB's involvement for the meters could be, I think it might be beneficial to have all 3 board members. I mean, we could certainly mainly be listening to their discussion and so forth. But I think I think they're going to have questions about the strategic plan and other priorities in addition to the meter stuff. So if we want to keep moving forward, especially with the cab having had a break for so long and not quite knowing what their priorities are right now, I think it might be beneficial to have all three of us there. That's just my thought.
Well, I think their priorities are our priorities. If I remember how this works, who's the tail and who's the dog, I think we need to let them know what we want them to take on.
I agree.
So what date are we looking at?
Monday next week is the 10th at 2 o'clock.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with it being all three of us.
I'm fine also.
So there's question one answered. So now the FCS presentation. If they're going to get that, let's tackle that one. Any questions about what changed their commissioners or any additions or corrections as to what you would like to see come out of that?
No, nothing in particular.
Yeah, I'm good with them getting the same presentation we got. I know exactly what tweaks you were referring to, Kevin, but yeah, I'm fine with it. So, and then third question was what direction we want to give them. Maybe that one's better kept for that day when we hear maybe what they're thinking and what they're looking at before we just go in there and arbitrarily just say, no, here's what we want you to look at. Maybe there's something we don't know yet. So I'm fine with waiting on that one unless you guys think there's more we should take on that perspective right now about what direction in particular to the meter program. It's specifically to the meter program, correct? Or is there something else we're talking about?
This meeting is meter program. I know we're going to have to do another joint meeting with the cab when we do get a little further along on some of the other issues we're working on. But this meeting would be cab, but it'd also be, once we work through the process with the metering, I think there's other projects that would kind of fall in line with the metering, and that template could be used over and over, the guidelines that the board gives. So
And
I think it would work well.
Did you have one more topic or question that you threw out there, Kevin?
Nope, I'm good.
So unless the commissioners want to respond anymore, we'll throw it over to Dawn and Jessica in case they have any questions or anything that they wanted to put forward.
The advertising for this meeting, it will be advertised as a CAB meeting or a workshop with the board, or we kind of have a draft agenda that covers the subject matter, but I wasn't sure exactly how you want to approach.
We would advertise it as a special BOC meeting and CAB meeting. So Annette and I've already talked, not knowing which way this discussion would go, but we would get everything ready to go within the next day or two.
And we would run it. I would open the meeting for the BOC, and then Jessica would open the CAB meeting, and then we would just go from there, correct? That's the way we've done it in the past.
Correct.
So Will have put together the kind of the agenda for that then?
Between Will and Annette.
Okay.
But because it is a special meeting, now we need to remember we can't take action on anything other than what's on that agenda. And so if I'm recalling this correctly, the way the procedure works, so we need to make sure that we've got captured everything that we want to capture before we put that out to the papers of record or on the website.
So then I need more direction, because the only thing I think we're really talking about is metering and the CAB participants. We could also put in their CAB roles moving forward, something like that, if the commissioner wants.
So maybe this is where Jessica could weigh in if she's been in touch with the other CAB members, what their priorities are, that we do not overlook something that really does need to be on that special meeting agenda.
I think you've probably got it pretty well covered. And we had originally, Don and I should say Gary Rowe and I had been setting this meeting up specifically to address where the Board of Commissioners is headed in this direction with the cab, and what specifically what specifically the participation of the cab in this process they would like to see done. So I think this would be well in line with pretty much what we were planning on discussing. As you know, the cab has met very infrequently during the last year, and we really don't have a lot of direction on different topics because we have not gone to the strategic plan, which is where we thought we were headed. And it looks like this is going ahead of that. So I don't see any conflict in setting this up as a special meeting.
So Kevin, I might suggest, and people can speak up if they disagree. This, because we have had some turnover in the cab and it has been a long dry spell, maybe it would not hurt to have on the agenda resolution 2015-18 for review. I think it's 2015-018. That's the cab, not their operating guidelines, but it is kind of the rules that the commissioners, if I remember right, kind of set up for the cab's roles and responsibilities.
Dan, I might step in on that and suggest that in the interest of time, and we could definitely go through that. I don't have any issue with that, but that I might just put that out to the cab members in an email, just suggesting to them that they all review that prior to this meeting.
Yeah, I would expect that was part of the onboarding packet. I think that it makes sense to put it on there as a placeholder. I think definitely we need to exhaust the part about the meters first, but have it on there so that if there is some action the board wants to take about setting sideboards or guidelines or direction, if we have that on there, we might be able to address it through the in the resolution.
Well, I think we can do both then. I will send out an email, either I can send it out or Dawn, to the cab, and just giving them direction to read through and review and make sure that they have a good comprehensive understanding of that. And then also, as you say, go ahead and put it on the agenda, sort of just in case.
Commissioners, any discussion, agreement, disagreement?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's good with me too.
All right, Dawn, Kevin, anything else, Jessica, with this cab meeting agenda that we're overlooking or should talk about?
So Kevin, on the agenda for the meter replacement program, there'll be the presentation, the ask of what you'd like the cab to do, and then a review of this timeline to make sure that they can accommodate the timeline that's been put together already that concerns them. Is that correct?
So I think that I don't know how to do the ask won't be on the agenda because
No.
the ask has to be negotiated between the board and the cab.
So
To me, that's part of this whole mix here.
next step discussion.
Next step, I can go with that.
Sounds
Cool.
good to me.
Cool.
Okay, so it looks like staff and everyone associated with the cab has their direction and understanding of what's going to transpire. Anything else? Any further comment or discussion on the cab item? 6.1. Let me see.
Excuse me, I just want to thank the board for being willing to come and see this presentation that they just got recently, so that there's greater clarification and inclusion with the cab. So I just want to extend my thanks to you all.
Thanks, Jess. So anything else? I think we're going to throw a break in right here. It's been almost an hour and 45 minutes. We'll take the first one of those breaks I talked about. If there's no objection, a 5-minute recess. It is now 6:44. We will reconvene at 6:49. Will?
We are
Thanks
now
for letting
recording.
me know I was off mute.
Yeah, we're back recording again. This is Dan Tupper, president of the board. It is 6:49, and we are going to resume our session with item 6 under old business, item 6.2, timber sale contract. Kevin, is Scott going to take this one? Kevin, is Scott going to take this?
Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you, Scott. I don't know if Kevin's online yet or not.
Yeah, I'm here. So did you actually start up, Dan? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're recording again. We're back in session. We hit 6:49
Okay.
and I dropped the hammer.
6.2 timber sales contract up at Peterson Lake. Scott, jump in here.
All right. Okay,
Scott,
so
we Scott, if you could, let's verify one more time. We still have a quorum. Commissioners, are you both with us?
More or less.
Present.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, no problem. PUD owns a parcel. The county parcel number is 801-061-004. It's 210.52 acres out at the end of Peterson Road off of Eagle Mount. We have talked about logging portions of this property on a sustainable basis for years at the PUD, and this is the year we need to take advantage of the cost of the timber increases and log a portion of the property. We would like to log portion number 63. It's a 12.5 acre parcel. It is a total board foot of 515,436 board feet. There's a mixed batch in there of red cedar, Douglas fir, and maple, a little bit of hemlock, and a little bit of alder in that, but it's predominantly red cedar. And I believe this would be a very good boost to the PUD's COFRs financially by doing this. We do have a local contractor that has bid on the project and is interested in the project and would like to log the property. What I'm asking for is a motion to move forward with this.
So Scott, it's Commissioner Tupper. Couple of questions real quick. So I see, I obviously have the cover page here. Now, is this a selective cut?
Yes.
So who's responsible for what in this? Obviously, it says 55% to 45% logger versus PUD. Who's in charge of the reforestation and, the removal of the slash, just so that we know, who's responsible for what? Can you give us a brief rundown? You don't have to go into every detail, but the kind of stuff that people driving by or people that are looking at maps from Google Maps are going to say, who's supposed to be doing what here?
Okay, the PUD had the offer from the logging contractor was a 55-45 split, 55 to the PUD, 45 to the contractor, which is a pretty standard offer. And what that means is we will split the cost of the trucking. The logger will provide services for all the paperwork that entails in this process. The contractor will clean up the parcel. The PUD would be responsible for reforestation. And I highly suggest we move on that immediately after we log.
Okay, so that's good. Good to know that what, things we're going to be responsible for, so that if the public asks us, we're ready to make that, you'll be able to make that public. So another question, this came up when I first became a commissioner of this project, and it's obviously we're just now coming back around to it. My question is about the 2010 forest management plan that we have for this asset. It's 11 years old now, and this is the first logging that's been done. Where are we at with a schedule moving forward of future logging, and as far as do we need to reevaluate the plan?
Right now, Kevin has been discussing with me about another project for this year up there. And I would like to pursue that after we get this project done. I've kind of got some bidding prep. I've got to look at the map and see where the next portion was to be logged. I believe it was stand 19, but I would have to verify that and just start going through and do what the forester had suggested.
Okay, good enough for this point. So that was a couple of the questions I had. So what you're looking for is to accept the offer from the logging contractor of the 55-45 split. And that's the motion that we need to put forward, is to accept this bid.
So if I can ask,
Go ahead, Ken.
what sort of revenue do you anticipate this generating for the PUD?
You know, if we hit the market at the right time, it's timber is very volatile pricing. It can be very high and very low. For instance, when we did this timber cruise way back when, we had on the cruise 277,000 board feet of red cedar. At the time, red cedar was worth $975 a thousand board feet, for a total of $270,000.75. Now, red cedar has gone up. It's 1,800 a thousand board feet. So you can do the math on that. And
No,
that comes out to,
It's doubled, Commissioner.
that comes out to $498,600 just for the red cedar. Now, the Douglas fir, its pricing right now is about $850 a thousand board feet, and when we did the forester did his work, it was at about $688. But there are some variables in that. It depends on the grade of the wood and where it goes. We're somewhat inhibited with the Douglas fir because we can't export it, so that is a little bit inhibitive. The maple, we don't really have enough on the property that we'll make a little bit of money off that, but not a whole lot. And same with the hemlock and the alder. There's not a lot there in this stand.
So, and it's safe to say, Scott, too, that, you know, this is a water asset. The money will go towards the water department. And there is going to be some cost, Ken, to the reforestation and the, you know, slash removal. Maybe, I don't know if we're chipping or what's going to transpire there. So
that's affirmative. Yes, there will be some cost to reforest. Like I said, I highly suggest that. We're going to remove all of the maple that is in this stand of timber, because for a timber farm, so to speak, it's not good to have maple on your farm, because the maples grow out so large and they take up a lot of the sun, and nothing grows in between underneath those maples because they're out so wide. So we will remove all the maple in this stand for forestry reasons.
Commissioners, anything else?
Quick question, Dan. You had mentioned that the Peterson Lake was a water asset, so the money would go to the water department. Is that true? Is the water division making the payments on the Peterson Lake, or is that coming out of general funds?
That's a staff question. I don't know.
That's not for Dan. That's for staff.
I don't know.
It is coming out of general funds.
Okay.
Not necessarily out of the water fund.
I think we'd have to take a look at that then before assigning that money to water, if the general fund is paying for the purchase. But anyway, yeah, great stuff. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, just so everyone knows, would you mention how many people you sent the bid to, so they don't think we only got one bid back? But would you just give a brief explanation of that, Scott?
Yes, I sent a bid to 9 logging contractors. 7 of them were local. 2 of them were from out of the county. Local, I'm meaning Jefferson and Clallam County and Mason County. That's what I feel is local. and 2 of them were not local. That would mean they were from Pierce County or outside of what I call local. And I did have some calls on it, but nobody really pulled the trigger like the local contractor did, Nisbet Temp Incorporated.
So you're still looking for a motion to move forward with this.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we approve the contract on the Peterson Lake timber sale.
And I'll second that.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on this item of the Peterson Lake timber sale? Is that somebody trying to get in, or is that Scott? I just see a phone lighting up here.
Yeah, this is Roger.
Go ahead, Roger.
Thanks. What's the price on the contract with, are we still with AFM?
No, we are not.
Who's managing this, and what's the price on the contract?
The PUD's managing the project, and the total price on the project is estimated at about $600,000.
I think he might be asking about, is that the price you wanted, Roger, or the price of what the contractor that we've engaged, the forester? Which
The forester, the forester that's managing this.
We don't have a forester managing this. This is PUD manager at this point.
Through the forest management plan that we have.
Correct.
All right.
All right. Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Motion passes. So with that, we will move on to item 6.3, broadband planning.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
Yep, thanks, Scott. 6.3, broadband planning.
You're so muted,
Is
Kevin.
this Lori Ray?
I'll start and Lori can jump in where she sees fit. This is an extension of the meeting we had last week. The information is the same with an exception of one new document that's in the board packet that really talks about what it takes to be an ISP and what we would have to do, and gives us a very good little primer. It brings up a lot of questions. So for the board, our question is the same, but this is an official board meeting. We're really saying we don't need anything approved today, because the minute we approve this whole process, it does lead us down a path. What we do want discussion today and guidelines from the commission is to move forward, spend some money to get grant opportunities. We are looking at having a grant opportunity in Quilcene and Discovery Bay. We are looking for a minimum of $5 million grant money in both locations. We would have NOAANET engineer one location, and we would have Doug Dawson's engineering firm engineer the other. Rough numbers, we're looking at from the substation building out as far as we could. A pond system is good for approximately 12 miles, so that would hit both Discovery and Quilcene. We would meet up in the middle. So a lot of information there, everything we've gone over. I'm trying to shorten some stuff up. At the next BOC meeting, we will bring a contract for ISPs. We reviewed those on Monday. Lori Ray and I had a meeting with Doug Dawson, and there's quite a bit. I really wasn't. I wasn't aware that the ISPs, you know, there's some taxing, there's all kinds of things that has to happen on the ISP side. We have to have contracts with them to put the PUD legally, so that if they don't do what they are, we've at least got documentation that says, you know, they're going to comply with the FBI, that they're registered with the FCC, that they've done the things that they're supposed to. So that will be coming with this long list of information, will be coming to the board maybe at the next meeting. There will be some additional drawings. Drawings were completed today to show discovery and quilcing. We did not get them in the packet because they didn't finish up till, oh gosh, maybe an hour before the meeting. We're pushing ahead, but we're going to need to start spending some money. We believe with the information that Alex did on the GIS side, that within a week to 10 days, we'll have decent engineering costs to come back and say, okay, for us to move forward and to get you to a place you need to do, for one, the grant, and two, the actual building of the facilities. We'll have those numbers. We can bring those back to the board, but we're at a point where we're going to start spending a little money. The board knows needs to kind of say, okay, go ahead. We are being very cautious. We're not trying to jump in whole hog, but we're far enough down the path now that fairly soon we're going to have to make a decision to keep going down. And it is staff's recommendation that we keep going this way. But to keep on a kind of a fast track, but once these engineering estimates get done, we will throw them into grant opportunities. And the minute we get confirmation on some of these grants and move forward, we'll adopt all these policies. We'll start really recruiting ISPs, because ISPs aren't going to come here with what we have. They're going to want to know that we are going to expand, and they're going to want to see that dedication, that upgrade to what the PUD has done in the past. And we are going to recommend that the PUD becomes an ISP. So with that, I'm going to really open it up for questions. A lot of information there. I can go over it piece by piece. I don't think we need to, but is there any questions?
Yeah, Kevin, you hit everything that you had on the cover sheet there, and that last statement that you made about us becoming an ISP versus you said you're going to be bringing some ISPs forward. Could you differentiate a little bit between those two paths? I mean, they're kind of separate paths, right? We're going to wait and see what the ISPs have before we get too carried away about trying to become an ISP, or what exactly are you saying there?
No, staff's recommendation is to become an ISP. We are an open network. We will encourage people to come in and connect these customers, but if they don't, then the PUD will. To me, it's that simple, Dan. Encourage them, bring them in, but it is an open access network. They don't have to connect people, but we would.
Kevin?
Go ahead, Ken.
So looking at the $200,000, approximately what percentage of that is going to cover the engineering, and what percentage is going to go to the grant writing?
So in the first couple weeks, Ken, the engineering will be, and these are very rough numbers. I shouldn't even throw them out, but I'm going to throw them out there. Between 30 and 40,000. And that gets us engineered to the point that they can apply for grants. And then on the grant writing, I don't know. We are going to go down two different paths with grant writing, one with NOAANET and one Doug Dawson will do the engineering, and we'll look at options to do some grant writing. Some of that we're going to try to do in-house, but we're also going to try to have some people help us as needed. And so I don't have the costs on the grant writing, but it shouldn't be any more expensive than the engineering. And the engineering per job is roughly 35,000 per job.
And the grant or grants that NOAANET will work on, they will also, I'm assuming, partner with us in other ways if that money comes through?
So we have had some discussions with NOAANET on changing our existing contract to, because our partnership with them does have to change a little bit as we move down this road, because we're going to have expenses out, and so there will be a partnership, Ken, but it'll be a little different. I'm not sure what that's going to look like going forward. Right now, we split revenues in Jefferson County. Moving forward, as we, for example, develop the Quilcene area, with us doing all the work, we can't do the 50-50 split. That just, we would not be able to afford to do that. So how that partnership changes, I don't know, but we have had early discussions with NOAANET that it does need to change, and we'll move forward in a little different direction as we build out, or if we build out.
Jeff, anything? So,
No questions.
so
Other than, I guess, Kevin saying that we're going to have, pretty soon we're going to be asked to do things. I guess specifically, when are you going to need a motion? When are you going to need more specific direction? And I know that we've got the rates and the whole plan in front of us too, with line in, line out.
So this is a very fast moving project. The governor has to sign a bill. Once that happens, that pushes us a little further down the track, Jeff. So I'm saying I believe we will need an answer within a month. We may not have the grant money, but we would have to move forward in such a way to make sure we get the grant money. So a month to 6 weeks. But the documentation's there, we're ready.
So Kevin, I'm looking at the next page. It's page 70 of the packet, and after your cover sheet on this, and you have tasks that need to be undertaken. I had a couple, identify the project team. What's the timeline, and who exactly are you talking about there?
Well, that's easy. The project team is myself, Lori Ray, and Colton. Scott helps with the contracting. So really for the broadband, it's Colton, Lori, myself, with Colton doing the outside work, Lori Ray doing the engineering and inside work, and
It's
I'd like
all
to
in-house.
go and
In other words, my point is this is all being done in-house.
today it's being done in-house. Now, as we expand, though, the project team will include Doug Dawson's engineers and NOAANET's engineers. But that said, Lori Ray already deals with NOAANET engineers, and we go to at least a meeting once a week with Doug Dawson to make sure we're continually going down this track. So they do become part of the team, and they do start costing us more money as we have them develop plans and issues for us.
Okay, so then my second question on this task list is organizational readiness. So what context are you really looking at with that statement of organizational readiness, and then the description that you have there?
Organizationally, for today, we're fine. As these grants become available, as we get grant money, we will have to staff up. So organizationally, today we're fine, but with a quick time frame that this will all come down into, we do have to be able to expand in and hire some people and bring more people in from the utility to do different things.
So assuming that the legislation gets enacted either by the stroke of a pen or not doing anything, it'll become law. I guess looking at timelines, and you've already made a statement that we want to become staff thinks we should become an ISP. Do you look at that as being an electric department subsidiary or a standalone department? Because it's going to matter as to how we're going to fund it and how we're going to build it.
I think it is part of the electric utility, but there'll be some rules in there that says, hey, you're kind of arm's reach out of the PUD, not out of the PUD, arm's reach out of the electrical division, because the ISP has to be treated like the other ISPs. So there will be a little separation, but the same billing folks will do the billing, the same, there's a lot of crossover that will happen.
So anyone else, any other questions about we have the red line policy. I went through it and I saw a lot of the changes were made. I appreciate staff's work there on the red line and, the finished product. I see where, a lot of the changes I definitely saw there that got made. So did anybody catch anything else or have any comments on those two, the red line and the final product?
No, I appreciate staff providing that for us to be able to really see how much work went in and what got changed. I do want to also comment that as I understand it, it's not at all a foregone conclusion that the governor is going to sign the legislation or let it go through. As I understand, the big telecoms are lobbying very, very hard to get this off the governor's desk and into the wastebasket. So I think it remains to be seen.
Oh, definitely. Point taken. He can pick up his pen and cut parts of it out or whatever. I was just looking at the optimistic part of it that we're moving forward. So on the assumption that, it does get put into law in a way that it would work for the PUD. Otherwise, we'll know real quick that, we're going to go to plan B.
So Kevin, I have a question. Are we in a holding pattern until the governor signs, but you just want to be ready to go if and when the governor signs?
No, we are, there multiple things have to happen. If the governor signs, we become and go down the path of an ISP. If the governor doesn't sign, we still, I believe, will get grant opportunities from the state. So one path, we're trying to get in position with all the engineering, all of our costs, everything ready for the grant opportunities. And then if the governor signs, we'll go down a kind of like a parallel path to become an ISP.
So I guess the real question is, if the governor doesn't sign, it definitely affects the business model. And does it then affect the riskiness of the investment? We kind of get back to that question of no major ISPs have ever gotten involved on an open access network. It's interesting. So I guess my question to you is, do you anticipate spending significant chunks of that $200,000 prior to the governor signing?
No, we will commit about 60,000 of it to get the engineering. But, and this is kind of where I'm sitting. If the governor signs the bill, we need marginally less grant money. If we don't become an ISP, we need more grant money. So that's kind of the trade-off, because if we're not selling a product, we can't really afford to build it, because I don't know. There's going to be some ISPs that just aren't going to come in our service territories. Others will, but it's a tough business.
Okay. Well, I guess my question for the other commissioners is, we've been presented a budget of roughly $200,000 for this year. It sounds like it starts us down the path of being committed to expand our broadband network and develop our business model, depending upon the opportunities to be an ISP or not. Are we comfortable with that path at this point? The commitment for 200,000 this year, and going down that path, or do we have more questions, need more information?
Well, we had $700,000 in the budget for broadband. I don't know what's been spent or not spent so far. And most of what we're doing is work that I think we would be doing for our own SCADA systems and other things anyways. So at this point, if it's only, $30,000, $40,000 and some extra engineering, that sooner or later we may be able to put to use it, whether it's for broadband or our own SCADA system. I'm comfortable with the 200,000 the way it's been described tonight out of the budget.
Yeah, I'm also comfortable with that. I think the greatest risk is the opportunity cost of doing nothing.
So I am also comfortable with the way you're describing it. I feel like staff and with the consultants' help, you've really tried to reduce the risk as much as possible, given all the unknowns that still exist. You're trying to give us a phased approach. You're trying to apply the experience of other utilities and mistakes they've made, and you're trying to give us a very reasonable approach. So I'm comfortable with it too. So I mean, based on that, Joel, with kind of a consensus direction, do we have anything else we need to do for staff to be able to move ahead?
No, I think it sounds to me like Kevin just needs the head nod at this point, and that is that right, Kevin? Because you're not ready to spend the money.
Yeah,
right?
he's got consensus and it's his budget. So, the money's there and it's his budget. And that's why we pay him to direct, the PUD is to, he thinks he's got this under control and that we're not wasting money per se, that we're taking the steps we should take. I think I'm comfortable.
Dan, we don't have this under control. We're kind of winging it, but we're winging it in a good direction, I think.
Hey, I'm trying to be supportive here. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. All right. So is there any other discussion on this item 6.3 broadband planning? There's no vote to be taken. So if the public wanted to weigh in, 3 minutes per person.
You got a hand, Karen Bennett.
Go ahead, Karen.
Hello, as you all know, it's Karen Bennett, and I'm speaking both in my role as the Jefferson Broadband Action Team Chairperson and in my role as a local resident and business owner. I think it's a great idea for the PUD to have these policies and rates documented for the broadband business you're already in. So I applaud the group putting forth that material, the material you're reviewing tonight. And frankly, I also think the $200,000 is going in a good direction to evaluate and pursue going forward. But as you consider expanding the broadband business, please just know that the further you wade into that pool, the more we residents and businesses rely on the PUD to deliver results. So I want to impress upon the commissioners and the management two things, one having to do with feasibility, one having to do with the grants. It's in our best interest, we residents and businesses and ratepayers, and in your best interest too, to fully understand what the PUD is expecting to do and whether it is a feasible venture. For two reasons, we, the JBAT, implore the PUD to have a feasible business plan for broadband, or at least in chunks by neighborhood or by area, one that estimates costs and take rates and income and competing service and who those ISPs are that actually would work with the PUD in this way, and that has a necessary ROI, return on investment. And we say that first because we want the PUD to stay whole, and we don't want the PUD to take on unnecessary risk, but also because we residents and businesses we need a solution for an ISP or a broadband service provider to stay in business, to deliver on what they promise and to stay in business. And so having a business plan, if the business plan and feasibility that you're looking at doesn't look viable, then you should not go forward. At this point, the various analyses so far that have been presented to the commissioners haven't been ones where I've actually seen positive feasibility. Maybe the $200,000 investment will show you something different. My second point is about the grants. If the PUD is really going to go after the grant funding, then I just strongly recommend that for each grant request, there be some set expectation for how many residents and businesses will have available services when the project the grant pays for is complete. If the feasibility studies for those grants don't indicate that there will be services available to that group of residents and businesses, then it would be disingenuous to take that grant money, especially when potentially it could be applied in other ways that could be successful. So if the end result's only going to be fiber backbone from the grant money, while that may sound like it has some value, that value will not be realized by residents and businesses anytime soon. And at this point, having only fiber backbone hasn't really brought those services to the use of residents and businesses to date. So please don't get the cart before the horse, even for the allure of lots of grant money available.
So Karen, you're
yeah.
past 3 minutes. If Bill Putney's hand was up, if Bill wants to pick up where you left off, or Bill has anything to add, he's free to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think at Karen's point, I think, everybody thought when NoaNet came, ooh, fiber is coming to Jefferson County, everybody's going to get served. That didn't happen. I think that was the broad expectation, unrealistic, certainly. My question really was, I have some thoughts. I've been in the ISP business. I have some thoughts about how it might be competitive and might suck in some more ISPs. And I asked a couple of questions. Dan, I think the last time we had a great big broadband meeting, you took a question or two from people and suggested write their other questions off to CCG, which I did. And I got a response back saying, Kevin's got to approve it, which he hasn't. So I'm just wondering if part of the money you've allocated can go to Kevin to give to CCG to answer some of the questions that were asked that weren't answered in that last broadband meeting.
Thanks, Bill. So I don't have any background for you there. And if Kevin wants to add some background, if not, send your request again to Kevin via email, and we'll see if we can get it on the agenda if you don't get satisfaction down the road.
Easy peasy. Okay, great.
Anything else on this topic? Not seeing any more hands. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So it looks like we are done with item 6.3, broadband planning. So we will move on to item number 7, new business, 7.1, EDC funding request.
Okay, I'm going to jump in with both feet on this. And I guess I'll start with my position. A year ago, I would not make this recommendation. I didn't think at the time, this was really a place for the PUD to be, or where I thought we should spend some of our time. Fast forward a year, and with COVID and everything else, I have changed my opinion. I do believe that the PUD has a place in this group in the EDC. I go to a lot of meetings with the other entities, and I believe they're productive productive meetings. They are putting together what they're going to call a 5 jurisdiction agreement, where the EDC kind of keeps its own 8-man board, and that the electeds would put a 4-person group on their board. I believe the PUD should be there for slightly different reasons. I believe we do have a vested interest in trying to get new business and to sell more kilowatts, but we also have a vested interest in our community. And the EDC needs to be pushed, I believe, in a new direction. And I don't think without this new agreement that it will change. And without change, the EDC doesn't function to the best of its ability to help our community. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. They are kind of underfunded. So what is in the packet is the pre-agreement. It's kind of the higher level that, these are kind of the ones we want to see in the EDC, the ADO, and then we as staff will put together a document, an agreement that spells out what the EDC will do, how they will interface, not only with the staff and the managers, but with the electeds, how they will come in and give reports and kind of justify the dollars that they are requesting. Now, the request is for $30,000. It would be a 2-year agreement. With the 2-year agreement, I do believe we have to put some things in place that says, okay, we have to know that we've gotten something for our money. We have to know that they are working in a positive way for the PUD and the community. And if not, there's reasons that we could pull out after the agreement, but we would sign on for a 2-year agreement. And with that, I'll open it up to the commissioners. This is a new thing for us. It's a little bit different. Other PUDs do it. So it's not out of the realm of what others do, but this is a big ask, and we should really discuss it and make sure we're all comfortable moving forward. Because if we're not, then we shouldn't. But I have grown into where I do think it's good for our community if we're part of the equation, not part of we need to be part of the solution. So.
Commissioners?
Well, I'll chime in. I had Ken, were you going to go? Okay. I had a conversation with Kate
I
Dean.
didn't unmute myself fast enough. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. I had a conversation with Kate Dean, which I think I related at the last meeting. As I think about this stuff, I think of the challenges that we have had in this county about conversations about infrastructure, about development. There was some talk about that grant that it looks like the county has gotten for the tri-area sewer, and some comments that the city of Port Townsend might not be, the council might not be in favor of that. And I just think about what's our role. Our role is we're infrastructure. We plan for infrastructure, we build infrastructure, we try to run sustainable businesses, providing service with that infrastructure. And I think the IGC process has been interesting because we had a crisis and we had our 4 government entities come together, and I thought we collaborated pretty well in talking about some important agreements about what we should be trying to do as a county to help our citizens. And I think if we had a seat at the table at the EDC where we could talk about things like broadband needs, planning, grant opportunities, where we could talk about things like tri-area sewer, where we could talk about things like opportunities that the port might be working on economic development wise that we might be collaborating with on the infrastructure side. I think it would benefit our county. And if we're not at the table, I am concerned that our interests will not be represented. And I'm concerned that the other entities are going to feel our absence because we're the infrastructure experts outside the city of Port Townsend's water and sewer and stormwater provision. We're electricity for the whole county, and we do all that other infrastructure for the whole county. So I think we belong at the table for the benefit of the citizens of this county for the items that are going to be discussed. And I think the entities, especially the county, are really trying to bring the discussion happening at the EDC to a higher level. And I think the reason that the EDC is the way it is now, where it's mainly just kind of business interests are represented, was because of the dysfunction that has occurred in the past when the topic of development in this county has occurred, where the city has been arguing against development in the county or arguing about what the PUD was trying to do. And we've seen why we need to collaborate. COVID has shown us why we have to collaborate, and we've seen some positive results of collaboration. So I think we've laid the groundwork for working together, and I think our citizens need us to do that. So I appreciate Kevin's work, and I think the ask is modest enough that it's fairly low risk for us, and I think we belong at the table.
Go, Ken. I won't walk over you.
Yeah, so I agree with what Commissioner Randall has stated. I won't repeat his points, but I think they're compelling. We do need a seat at the table. Now, when I started as a PUD commissioner, at least on a policy level, I think on a functional level, there was communication between the PUD and the county and the city. But on a policy level, people were not talking with each other. And that has changed dramatically. And I think that that's a very positive change. I would add that I see a nexus also in the area of broadband. The EDC has, for the last couple of years, been very much involved in conversations around expanding broadband in the county. And I think that this is an area where there will need to be partnering. And one area where if we do become an ISP, if we do get grant funding, and I know those are big ifs, then that will mean, I think, a great deal of difference in terms of how business can expand in Jefferson County, and particularly bringing to the county people who have now gotten accustomed to working remotely. So I see this as a opportunity and well worth the investment. And so I'm wholeheartedly for this.
Well, I'm on the other side of the spectrum here. So, we have the ICG, so we have some levels of communication with other entities that, that didn't exist before, and there's those different committees. And I want to start by saying I've got no passion or prejudice against EDC. Those people do great work, and I have nothing against them. As far as how they're funded, I don't believe that this is part of the PUD's function. We give a lot to the community in different ways, and I don't necessarily think that this is one that we should be putting $30,000 towards, when we've already had discussions tonight about other places, where we're helping the community to do things, particularly with broadband as it's coming up. I see the PUD doing a lot of in-kind stuff there to help the community, with or without the help of the EDC or the cooperation or collaboration. So That's how I would begin my conversation, especially Jeff mentioned the sewer and he mentioned, broadband as well. The sewer thing, that's on a trajectory of its own. The money's there, 20 million from the federal government and $1.5 million from the state. Or was it 20 million from the state? Anyhow, it's 21.5 million. That's enough to do the system just about right now without any money from the people. And we're the water purveyor, so we will be at the table. We've been at the table already with those sewer meetings. So it's not like we're on the outside looking in. We have been taking part in those with Public Works and other people with the sewer policy and what's going to happen there. So again, I sent Philip Morley, some thoughts there a month and a half ago on this topic. And when I read through the proposal that they put out, I've got a lot of issues with the proposal, but I could see some of the stuff in there, that I had discussed over previous models that had come out being brought up and incorporated in there. So I was glad to see that. But here's, again, the county and the city, arguably the city in particular has a lot of the businesses. I get that. That's not lost on me of that, they're the big dog in the pen here. But they also, they get a lot of funds and we're not privy to. We have ratepayer funds. That's how we, are going to do this, is with our ratepayer money. So whether it's 30,000 or 300,000, this is one more thing we're putting on our ratepayers. And getting back to the city and the county, they set the ordinances, they set the zoning, the permitting, growth management rules, critical areas ordinances, master shoreline agreements. They can limit or determine the business development in the county, whether we have anything to say or we're at the table or not. Because like I said, we have other avenues. PIF board is another one. And the PIF board puts $55,000 of that infrastructure money to EDC already. That's the contract. I voted for this board to allow them to have that money. So again, you could argue that we're already somewhat contributing by agreeing to do that. So when I look at this proposal, I see a lot of things in it, but the nuts and bolts of the proposal itself, I have a lot of questions about who's going to determine a lot of these different items. Are all three geographic areas of this county, all three commissioner districts, they each have 10,000 people, maybe not as many businesses, but are they all going to get the same considerations? So I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds because I've got more yellow in this thing than I do black and white. So I could pick it apart all day long, and that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to make the case for whether or not we should be putting ratepayer funds towards this endeavor. And the answer for me is no at this point, not without a heck of a lot more explanation about this ADO proposal that came forward. That was a lot. That was a lot at warp speed.
Well, Bill Putney's got a hand up.
Well, I before we go to the public, I want the commissioners because that's what's before us right now is in this timeline. On the last page, they're already halfway through this timeline with the ADO process. So I think maybe the commissioner should definitely get the time. Is there any other questions? Is this going to come up at the ICG? Is that the next stop for this? I know the county's going to take some action, but what's our role in this moving forward?
So what I see our role is, I would like guidance today so that we can go back to the group and say, okay, tentatively, we're going to support this. They will, I believe, ask everyone on the 20th, the IGC meets, and there'll be a lot of discussion there, I believe. But at the next meeting, I'm going to ask for a motion to support it. And that way, when we get to the meeting on the 20th, the discussion's had amongst our board. We don't want to discuss this at that meeting. We want to have a decision made, and we have one more meeting before that so that we can say, yes, we are going to do it. Again, I'm going to say a year ago, I would have voted with Dan 100%, but things have changed, and I do think we are needed at the table. So that's kind of my change. But yes, I think at next meeting, I'm going to ask for a motion that we join the EDC group.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate, the county's getting somewhere between $100.5 million to 200 million. I don't know what the city's going to get if they get part of that. This, to me, the city and the county should be funding this. That's kind of really my take on this. Ratepayer, using ratepayer money for this, to me, is it's wrong. So I am a definite no now, next week, and the week after. Is everybody muted, or is that just crickets?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
I don't either. I've stated my position on this.
Okay, so we will go to Bill Putney. 3 minutes, Bill.
Okay, start to watch. So put my microphone on. So for me, this is, the city's in it because the city wants to be in everything. The county's in it because, it's really their thing to delegate. The port is in it because economic development is really part of our mission statement. I think the PUD ought to be in it, to be part of the club, because I think that the thing that we've started with the IGC and the executive roundtables that have been going on has had such a positive impact on getting things done, and foreshadows a lot of collaboration that we've struggled to have in this county for forever. And that, to me, that's number one on the list. Number two, if you can't make $30,000 a year back on having additional down county business and residential service, if you can't find that many more ISP customers because all that development is being done, then yeah, maybe, cut the budget back. Dan, I would be, if I were sitting in your chair, I would take a hard look at not just the downside, but the upside. That's it.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else?
Kevin, what do you need from us tonight?
This was the first touch tonight. I think I have a little direction. Next meeting, it will be the next touch, and I'll ask for is it a motion to join, Joel?
Well, it depends, I haven't seen that. It sounds like there's ultimately an agreement. So yeah, so that if there's an agreement, then it would be to authorize you to execute the agreement. If not, it'd just be a motion to authorize you to proceed consistent with the direction that the BOC has given you.
Yeah, the agreement I'm hoping is talked about at the IGC, and it'll be a draft. And it's not ready today. So
Kevin, if I could give you my 2 cents on the agreement, if you could get something in there that says to encourage, customer usage of electric facilities or something like that in the language, just because why not, and give us a little comfort here.
So this is Jeff. I guess it seems like for next time, because we're going to be sitting in that ICG meeting shortly after that meeting, you don't want to show your dirty laundry in the meeting with a bunch of other elected officials, or at least I'd rather not, so whatever debate, discussion we need to have, hopefully we can have it in the next meeting. And if there are ground rules or questions we have, or things that we need to get back to feel better about it, it would be nice to have that discussion. And yeah, Joel talking about his language, I think some language about rational planning for infrastructure, that kind of stuff. And what Bill was saying, I too, if we're at the table, I think we should be able to get $30,000 of value back out of it and helping things go more smoothly for us and what we do. But that's just my thought. But I'm hoping whatever discussion we need to have next time before the ICG meeting would be nice to have.
Again, on the language of the agreement, I just see a lot of vague stuff in there about who's going to be picking whom, and what kind of representation there be, and whose vision is the right vision, and things like that. To me, we're going to spend $30,000. I agree. We better have some metrics that show how our ratepayers are going to get this back. And firm and concrete, not, well, if this happens and that happens, we might see something. No, it better be something specific as to how this is going to relate to the $30,000 our ratepayers are putting up for it.
And I'll just chime in too. I don't know if the agreement is going to get into this, but I think that anything that's formal, that's kind of like voting on agreements or anything else, I think those things should come back to the full board, because I think as opposed to like a representative to the EDC voting on it, I think we need to retain our jurisdiction, or that's not the word I'm looking for, but retain our board authority for things that affect our board. If we're involved in this group and this group is deciding things, we're going to need to insist on the time to get informed of it, including the full board informed of it, before we're obligating ourselves to anything. I'll just throw that in too.
Well, it's in the ICG, guidelines that we have our autonomy at the end of the day, that nothing that happens there is quote unquote binding, as I recall the way that those bylaws or whatever it was were written. So
yeah, that's the word I was looking for, autonomy.
Yeah. So again, we'd be airing dirty laundry if it got to that point at the ICG about what our autonomy is, and under certain circumstances. So they would get reminded of that. So again, is there anything else with this particular item, 7.1 EDC funding? Kevin, do you have the direction you want or need at this point? You and Joel are obviously, it looks like maybe gonna cross paths on this a little bit after Joel reads it or reviews it.
Yes.
All right. So any other questions on the EDC?
Public comment.
Go ahead, Roger, 3 minutes.
Thanks. I'll be short. I don't see this as taking away from the ratepayers. I see this as giving back to the ratepayers. And because practically nothing around here happens without grant money, I think we're key to making the project shovel ready. It's not shovel ready without us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger. So again, we are back to any other questions for 7.1 EDC funding? Seeing and hearing no hands or no people waving at me or nothing in the chat, we will move on to 7.2. Commissioner Collins, you have something you want to discuss?
Yeah, my fellow commissioners have seen an article that I had written. I wanted to get something into the paper that responded to the multiple emails that I'd gotten about raising the rates. And so before getting something out there, I wanted to give both of you an opportunity to comment on it in terms of anything that you might strongly disagree with. I got one piece of feedback through Kevin that about the ratio of commercial to residential customers being actually 9-to-1 rather than 10-to-1. So I want to ask at this point if there are any other errors that you might be aware of, or if there's an objection on principle to anything that I've said.
I don't have the letter in front of me, Ken, but I don't think I have anything on principle. I think the more information that we give the public, the more accurate information that we give them, not to get too deep into the weeds, but as long as we're keeping the numbers straight and consistent, to me, that's the most important thing. I don't know about your ratio of how many dollars customers are necessarily paying. I'm just trying to recall what the article had to say. So just that we're accurate as we can be. And now if you want to cross-reference that with Mike or, other staff, that's just my point, is let's just be as accurate and consistent with our messaging and these numbers as we can be.
Yeah, the numbers did come from Mike.
And Ken, I guess the only suggestion I would have is I read the letter. The last paragraph, first sentence says, a few of you questioned why you were paying more for electricity from the PUD than what PSC currently charges. And while the base rate is, I think their base rate's $750 a month now, is what I looked up, and we're at $1850, so that's $11 more a month. The kilowatt hour rates are right on, or actually we're a little bit less right now. So I think it's, you might, I don't know if you want to mention that, that our rates really aren't higher than PSC's. But otherwise, I thought the letter was fairly written, and it's definitely representing your viewpoint, and I think it represents the PUD well. But that was the only thing I could think of, is not giving into the whole we're charging more than PSC, because it's
well, the problem is, we spent a good portion of this meeting talking about rate increases, and that is a moving target. And I wanted to address it in terms of, I also looked up PSE charges compared to ours, and I wanted to speak in more general terms and make the point here that were it not for paying on the loan, at least at this point in time, we'd be well below PSC.
Understood. Yeah, I think you keep it to you're hitting pretty hard on just a few points, and that's always a better argument, by keeping your points simple and making it clear, and hopefully people will get the takeaways, and that the loan is a big one of them. The jobs that are in the county is a big one of them. The better service is a big one. So I think you did an effective job with your letter.
Yeah, and since you guys were talking about the loan, Ken, I think it would make sense to mention that 2042, we're just, starting down the road here. We got a long ways to go with that loan and the principal and the interest on that, even though the interest will just start decreasing as we go. I think we need to definitely remind people of, what kind of a horizon, what kind of trajectory we're on here, so that when we do talk about rates or expenses, rebuilding plant, the equity that we're building, and that you do touch on that. I appreciate that, that they understand, we're paying as we go, because we're not taking out loans and having to pay back other interest other than what we already are. So the more consistent we stay with the message and remind people of the things that we're looking at and dealing with as we set rates or as we make capital decisions, I think the better it's going to help the community to understand the why, of what's going on. So.
Yeah, and frankly, I'm not anticipating being a commissioner in 2042. But going back to
Bruce Jorgensen's like 90, so come on, I think you can make it.
Well, let's just say it remains to be seen.
Don't let him bully you, Ken.
And Jeff, the one point that you didn't make, which I really wanted to highlight in the article, is the clean energy point. I mean, that I think is huge and really relates to a widely shared community value. So thank you for your feedback, both of you guys.
All right. So any other questions about that? All right. So we will move on to commissioner reports. Jeff, you want to go first?
Sure. Let me get mine up here. Made some notes. Okay. So on April 22nd, participated in the PUD special board meeting regarding meter replacement. And we did have a NODC meeting later that afternoon. I went back and looked at my notes. Bill asked about that. The speaker was Kevin Galachi from Clallam County Transit, and they were talking about their plans for the future and pretty short distance future, not far off. They're planning some purchase of some electric vehicles. They talked a little bit about alternatives for fuels and that the electric vehicles will appear to be used in the Port Angeles urban area runs where they can have a vehicle charged up in the morning, run for about half the day, and then return to the barn for further charging and have another one come out that's fully charged. So they're planning on incorporating some electric vehicles in their fleet really soon. On the 26th, I met with the PUD manager via phone. On the 27th, participated in the PUD special meeting on the audit interview and the broadband planning. Looking ahead, on the 5th, I'll have another phone meeting with the PUD manager. And on the 11th, we have our quarterly Olympic Workforce Development Council meeting, and I'll participate in that PUD special meeting that day also. That's it.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll go ahead and go next. I got a pretty short report. I attended the meter replacement special meeting on the 22nd of April, as well as a Waputa legislative update. I met with Kevin Street on the 23rd. I attended the Jackson Thornton financial exit audit and the broadband discussion on grant possibilities and potential projects. I enjoyed the RUS training on the 28th, 29th, and 30th. Thanks, Kevin, for coercing me into having to do that. I appreciate it. It was good. It actually reaffirmed my opinion that, you know, a lot of things about what we're doing, we're on the right path, I believe. And especially when it comes to cost of service and, you know, things like that. So I will meet with Kevin Street and listen to PPC on the 5th of May. I have PPC Executive Committee on the 6th. I may listen in on JBAT on the 7th. I have East Jefferson Fire Chiefs meeting on the 10th. And obviously now we have the CAB meeting that day as well. And I will attend the special meeting on the 11th. So I also did get, I will mention, I did get a letter from a customer in my district, and they had a danger tree that was about 20 feet off of our right of way on their property. And they thought that, you know, maybe we should take that out as part of our tree trimming policy, and, you know, had to explain with staff about how that all works. But I did tell that customer that I would bring it to the board, because they were very concerned that we were ignoring something that could be potentially, you know, take out our infrastructure and cost a lot of money, and, you know, maybe harm someone, because it's just obviously close to the highway and things like that. And so I did want to say that maybe, you know, throw this out towards staff too, that we might want to revisit the policy and see if there are certain instances, and I know we have to treat everybody equally, you know, gifting of funds and things like that are problems. So, but it might make sense for us to evaluate if there's a landowner close to a substation with a $500,000 transformer that could get whacked, and there is a quote unquote danger tree, that maybe these are the kinds of things we should take a little finer look at. I'm not saying, just throwing that out there.
Hey, Dan, may I interrupt for just a moment? That tree is more about 40 feet out of the right of way, and we really shouldn't go that direction. That would, once we start doing that, we'd be trimming trees all over the county at request of the citizens. And I don't really like that idea. I did suggest to the man, if he's concerned about it, he can hire a tree crew to come in and do that. Because it is out of the danger.
And I totally agree, Scott. And I think you saw the email or the letter that I sent. So, but again, I think this is something we should take a look at, not in the near term, but something we should keep on our minds, that, you know, if there is a way to deal with this down the road, we might want to consider it. I don't know what that is yet. So
this is a situation where the tree was on the guy's property, and he was concerned it would fall over and hurt our infrastructure. So he wanted us to come in and cut it. Anyway, it's his tree. If it falls and hits our infrastructure, we're going to be, you know, not happy with him over not maintaining his tree.
Right. And that was pretty much what staff and I referred to him. But, you know, to make the point, I told him I would bring it to the board. You know, there's going to be other people like this, and they have a point. It's hard to explain to everybody that, you know, the discussion we're having. It's not our problem, but it is our problem. That's the way they look at it. So just for no other reason that, you know, it's something we might want to look at in the future of is there infrastructure we have where this is something we might want to consider. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying it's something we might want to keep on our radar.
Just for clarity purposes, it's not our problem though, right? Because it
It's not
really
our
is
problem.
on
That is
someone
correct.
else's property.
That
We have
is
no
correct.
if I could just finish it, we have no obligation as the PUD and electric utility provider to deal with that tree, but the landowner absolutely has an obligation. That's their obligation. So I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Tupper, about looking at the policy. I just think it should be clear about what our responsibilities are and aren't. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope.
No, I agree 100%. Like I said, this is just one of those things where we're going to, you know, if one person's looking at it this way, we need to make it known why we do or we don't do things. And the point being that maybe there is certain infrastructure that we may have to look at down the road that is critical, that, you know, there is something outside of our utility that we can recognize is going to be a problem and there might be a workaround for it. I'm not saying we should, I'm saying it's something we should keep on our radar. Commissioner Collins.
So the 21st of April, I attended the board meeting of Energy Northwest. Janet Herron was elected to fill the empty seat on the board created by the retirement of Sid Morrison. That does not mean that she'll take over as the chair of the executive committee. I think the committee has to decide who is the next chair. Janet Herron, incidentally, is the former chief operating officer of BPA. And prior to that, she spent 35 years at the Tennessee Valley. I think it's Tennessee Valley Administration. So she's got deep, deep experience with public power.
Tennessee Valley Authority.
Authority, thank you, thank you. There also was a presentation by a gentleman named Vince Sprinkle of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. He specializes in energy storage, and he made some interesting points about the limitations currently of lithium-ion batteries. And one of the problems is that there isn't an abundant supply of lithium in the United States. He commented that the vanadium flow batteries, while promising for utility scale installations, are not applicable to transportation. And at the present time, sodium flow batteries are not particularly efficient. Which leaves us, I think, with a certain dilemma going forward. On the 22nd, I attended the Waputa Legislative Alert and the BOC meter replacement meeting, the presentation by FCS on the 23rd. I attended the JBAT meeting as well as in the afternoon going on a building tour, which was very interesting, and I think Don McDaniel and a number of other people, Kevin, and I know I'm leaving people out, but beautiful job. It's really scaled to our needs, and it's very impressive. It's a beautiful building. On the 27th, I attended the special board meeting with the audit exit presentation, as well as the discussion on broadband. On the 30th, I attended the JBAT executive committee meeting on the 3rd, met with the general manager. Tomorrow and the following day, I anticipate joining the Public Power Council meeting remotely. On the 7th, there's a JBAT meeting that I anticipate attending. And then on the 11th, the special meeting of the board on broadband. On the 12th, there will be a NOAANET board meeting. And on the 17th, prior to our next board meeting, I will have another meeting with our general manager, and that's my report.
So Ken, did you decide in the boardroom, left seat or right seat?
I may be tired, but I'm not following you.
I told you last meeting I was taking the center seat, so just, I was wondering if you had dibs on which commissioner's desk you're taking.
Probably to the left of you, Dan.
Okay. Is there a pun in there?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, just wanted to be certain that humor was still in play. All right, so that's the end of commissioner reports. Any questions? Anything else? All right, so the next item on the agenda is an executive session. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we do that. So we'll come back after the break and we'll state the RCW and the reason for that, and then we'll stop the recording at that point. So I think it is 8:09. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and when we come back, we'll get into going out into the executive session. So with that, we'll be back at 8:15. Did you turn off the?
We are recording.
Dan Tupper, president of the board. It is 8:15. We're going to reconvene back into our regular meeting. And the next, actually, commissioners, would you chime in to make sure we have a quorum for the record?
Jeff Randall here.
Ken Collins here.
Thank you, gentlemen. Board's all back. So we have an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 parentheses 4 for discussions relating to the interpretation or application of the PUD's labor agreement. So Kevin, how long do you expect we'll need for this? You're muted. Still muted.
You're still mute.
20 minutes.
20 minutes, you're sure? All right. I told Jeff we'd be out of here before 9, so you're trying to keep our word, right? All right. So are we anticipating any discussion or action following the executive session? I mean, is this just information
No.
only?
Information only.
Okay. So
That's why it'll only take 20 minutes.
So with that, I'll read it one more time. Executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.140 parentheses 4 for discussions relating to the interpretation or application of the PUD's labor agreement. It is 8:16. We're going to take 20 minutes for executive session. We'll be back out at 8:36. With that, Will, you want to go ahead and put everybody out there?
Melanie can be in.
Okay, we're recording.
Dan Tupper, president of the board. It is 8:36. We've concluded the executive session for today. There's no discussion or action at this time. So that concludes our agenda tonight. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Any other final comments, questions? All right. We're done. 8:36. I'm going to put us into adjournment. Thanks, everybody.
Dinner time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.